Hey there, welcome to episode number 44 of Killer POV. I am one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from FEARNET and Icons of Fright. Joining me as always is Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria.
Hello, how are you doing tonight?
Pretty good.
Excellent.
And
He's
waiting in the wings.
awfully quiet tonight.
I'm feeling dazed. I'm like
he's
tired
got a
and
beer in his
dazed.
hand.
Yeah.
This beer is going to help energize me.
Is that the first beer of the night?
First beer of the night. And only because that's all I came with too.
And have you checked out the beard that Elric is
Probably the last day.
Yes.
It's probably the last day beard because it's getting kind of like naughty and, you know, I'll be Jeremy Gardnering before I know
that's
it.
It's gotten
Elric Kane.
intense.
Elric Kane, our third host. Yeah,
I'd
you
love
said
just
you were
the
going to
mo.
do the beard until we did the episode with Jeremy.
I felt like I should shave the second after being belittled by his giant beard.
No one
Yeah,
can top
that's a
that
mighty
beard.
After that,
beard.
it's like, what can you do?
Yeah.
Mine's never
And
going to
you
be
know
that
what?
big.
I just got to say, thanks to you guys for listening to last week's episode. We've been getting a lot of really good feedback after every episode, but a lot of new people popping up on Twitter, replying to us, and in particular, a lot of people that didn't know Jeremy and had heard us talk about the battery, but really felt the need to check it out and support it after they heard him on the show, which I think is amazing. A lot of regular listeners were saying, "Hey, I'm watching the battery right now." And I think that's really amazing and really cool. It's obviously that's the reason we brought him on.
Yep.
And I think that's super cool, you guys. We appreciate it. Keep the feedback coming. We really love it. And hopefully you'll do the same for today's guests and the subsequent guests that we have checking out their stuff. So we have a killer show coming up, pun intended. But do we want to tackle this quote unquote plagiarism topic first?
We do, because
right off the bat,
it kind of just keeps coming up where we keep seeing, a film emerge in the horror genre. And then a couple of years later, somebody will be like, oh my gosh, this was made first. It's obviously taken from this. And then everybody points the finger and
Do you guys think
it's kind of Body Snatchers-esque.
I mean, also with the internet in general this year, that seems to be a theme. So maybe it's just that we're all coming into contact with more material, and it's easier to level plagiarism for one. Whether it's journalism, we have Shia LaBeouf over the last couple weeks, which is a big deal. Like
it is.
I mean, he was writing in the sky, apologizing and saying he's retiring from public life. This is an actor who's like, becoming, his star's rising. He's in freaking Transformers now. He's saying he's going to retire because he got caught doing something stupid. Like,
well, he doesn't ever have to do a movie ever again if he doesn't
but
want
that means
to.
you didn't mean it, right?
Skywriting done. I mean, Elric and I were standing outside
absurd.
watching him write "Stop Creating" all over the LA skyline.
What he should do is stop apologizing and just hand Dan Clowes fucking money.
Yeah.
Like just say, hey, I'm sorry, Dan Clowes, you awesome artist. Here's a bunch of money. I fucked up. Sorry. And Dan Clowes will probably be cool with that.
Yeah.
Because he's a cult author, So I don't know. But it is interesting. I definitely think, all these topics are probably different. Like, a film that might have seen something at a festival could completely be plagiarist. Another article, somebody's ripping off bloggers, is going to be pretty easy to prove the guilt.
Yeah.
And same with Shia LaBeouf's case. But it's because of the proliferation of the internet being able to figure this stuff out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and Rob, why don't you tell the story of the specific artiple that led us to have this discussion today?
This is the reason I brought this up, is because I got into work today at FEARNET, and my supervisor, Chris Connors, we were just chit-chatting about stuff, and he's like, oh, I just read this article on Reddit last night about this movie called Den. I actually wrote it down. The article was written by a guy named Frank Grimes, who actually contacted me via Twitter after I said we were going to talk about it.
Is that a real name?
Yes.
Okay, because that's also the name of a Simpsons character.
It could
and
be
sounds
his
like a film
name.
noir character, for sure.
And he writes for a blog called Unseen Films, which, Rebekah, you should probably get
great.
along with.
I love that blog. It's phenomenal.
So he wrote a blog about a movie from an Australian movie from 2001 by a filmmaker named Greg Arce.
A short film, right?
No, it's a feature.
It's a feature.
It's a feature called Den, D-E-N. And the article was kind of a analysis that the movie is very, very similar to Saw, to the first Saw. And there's no actual proof that, James Wan or Lee Wanell saw this original movie and were like, oh, let's do something just like it.
Except that they're little rascals.
And they're from Australia.
They're from Melbourne.
From Australia, and the film played once in 2001 at the Melbourne Underground Film Festival.
When they would have been students in their film school. Yeah, there's
That's
no way
not
to
a
prove.
fact, but that could have been the case.
The similarities were a little too hard to ignore. It wasn't just like I wrote a film about a guy torturing people to, get some type of like end cathartic message across. And you did too. It was very much like a play by play, straight down to the imagery of even like the white face with the red swirl on it.
Yeah, but where'd that image come from? Because that's not a DVD cover. Because it's like, I'm not trying to discredit. I told Frank on Twitter today, I thought he wrote an excellent article and made an excellent point.
It's a great synopsis of both.
You'd have to watch the film. I mean, that's how I felt reading it.
Film. Yeah. I was like, well, let me look at what it looks like. And I couldn't find a trailer initially because they've been pulled off of YouTube.
Why?
I don't know. That's
so did Soul win a counter?
No, I mean, like I think the filmmaker says in this article that he pretty much went broke trying to hire lawyers.
Trying to sue them.
Well, what's interesting about that part, he kept saying that they all said it was a slam dunk case.
Yeah.
All these lawyers he would hire, and then they would not pull out eventually.
I assume that there's an international problem there because it's very difficult to sue people overseas. So like if you're an Australian filmmaker trying to sue a U.S. filmmaker, I assume
less litigious.
It's a bit more daunting.
Yeah, America's far more litigious. I mean, I think the similarities are interesting. I think when
they're listed though. So I did actually find something else that claimed to be a trailer, but what it looked like a trailer that had music, but it was actually just like stills from the movie, like as opposed to like actual footage from it. And judging from the stills, I apologize to the filmmaker. I haven't seen your movie. I can't see it, but I mean, it looks kind of like almost like a shot on video style thing. And the killer looked nothing like the killer. It
was made
like
for, I think he said $150,000.
Yeah,
so it's obviously low budget.
A very low budget film. And I mean, footage wise, I don't see it. When you list out certain things, certain characteristics that we see in a lot of horror movies, like, oh, it's two people and it takes place in a dingy bathroom, whatever.
There's a twist. And the guy that we thought was dead is actually alive.
Yeah. And I mean, but there it was like, well, it's not a twist in his movie. Again, I don't know. I argue that I don't buy it and I think it's coincidental, at least in this case. And the only reason I do is because, well, for several. One, both James and Lee have proven, like, it's not a case of like, oh, we stole this one movie, we became gazillionaires off of it or whatever, and never made another movie again. It's like they've proven time and time again that they're very, very talented filmmakers and very talented craftsmen. Every movie's different. And I mean, the fact that, James struck lightning several times at this point.
I think James had no idea and Lee copied it beat for beat. And Lee, if you're listening, you're a total charlatan. No, I mean, and that could, that could be true too, because I've heard the story a million times from them,
right, that Lee is the one that pitched the bear trap scene to James.
Right.
And James being obsessed with puppets, he would put puppets in all their college films. He pitched the story goes that he pitched him the bear trap scene and you have to cut the key out and that's how he gets it out. And then James apparently was like, and what if we had a doll in there? And they're like, well, how would we have a doll come in there? He's like, on a tricycle.
Oh my God.
And that's in the movie. And you're like, holy shit, that's pretty funny.
No, but I mean, the thing about movies and art and things like that is like, it's very easy to see things and forget you saw them or recycle them in weird ways that become your own.
Dave and I were talking about that because after this came up today, I was suddenly like, I get so scared of that because there are so many times that Dave and I are just like, we're cooking dinner and I'll just be like, hey, Dave, I just came up with this awesome idea for a script. And I will go through and tell him beat by beat. And then he will look at me and be like, it was in Outer Limits from 1984, Becca.
Yeah, no, that's true. Especially things like that.
Seeing it, but it was in Outer Limits.
Yeah, less movies. Movies, you do tend to remember the source. Like you might not always remember the name, but you would know if you had seen that movie. Yeah. But I agree with you. TV and Twilight Zone and Outer, sometimes they all filter Tales from the Crypt. They mesh together and you might remember, maybe I saw a movie like that, but it's probably a TV.
Right.
There's so many things that I can look at and say, well, it's very similar. Like when Chronicle came out last year, I remember being like, was that an X-Files episode? And I went back and watched it. It was an X-Files episode. Very, very similar, same kind of concept with the kids, getting the superpower and everything. But it's different. And so there's weird lines to be drawn. Now, what happened with Drew Daywalt for me is kind of inexcusable. That's like a Shia LaBeouf thing. Where somebody kind of copied Drew's short
Bedfellows.
Beat for beat. Bedfellows, down to the effects makeup on the monster.
Yeah.
And
I didn't get to see it. it got kind of cut off. It got taken offline before I got a chance to see it. I've seen stills from it, and it is definitely exactly the same short.
I mean, like lighting in the same place.
But you know, think about it. In a way, that's the same thing that was happening on a bigger budget level when like Turkish Star Wars, Turkish Jaws. So
they did a Turkish Exorcist.
Because I believe this was an Italian filmmaker, right, in Italy. So that whole international boundary too, where you're not going to get caught. I find this Australian case interesting because it's Australia. Right. It's a place that doesn't just like New Zealand. They don't make a lot of horror movies. So the fact that there was a film even that close, chances are, in all honesty, regardless of whether we believe them or not, chances are if that came out and they were in the town, they probably would have gone to that film because literally there's maybe 2 a year made, especially back then. I mean, maybe post-Saw more. So there's that side of it.
I don't know if it was made in Australia. We'd have to double check.
I think it said it was Melbourne. I said it was Melbourne.
An Australian film.
Now that said, I also totally believe things can come out subconsciously. Like they saw it, and often it's kind of like wanting to remake bad movies. They might have watched and not even liked it, but certain seeds.
And like, wouldn't it have been cooler if they did this instead? Or
the problem is
spins and spins and spins until you have something new.
Yeah.
But I mean, all art begets art, so you have to expect that.
You can't make anything out of a vacuum. You know, Wes Craven and George Romero are pretty. Well, Wes Craven especially is interesting because he kind of did make his first movies kind of almost out of nothing because he, if you look at those early stories, he didn't watch movies. He hadn't. He came from this like weird, I think, it was Methodist and or Calvinist, and his parents weren't letting him watch films.
Yeah, he didn't watch movies.
So he really didn't.
Until
really just before he made his first film. So I find that to be an interesting thing. But
the Last House was Virgin Spring. I mean,
totally. Obviously, it's seen something.
It's exact.
But you need to. The problem with the litigious side of this is that if James and Lee did realize, let's say they realized once this guy sued, like, oh fuck, we did. I remember that now. Seeing that film, I feel really bad. We should give him some money because the guy in his article says, well, even if they just gave me enough to pay my house, they can't. Because if they give them anything, even $1, they've acknowledged guilt of ripping someone off. And that is a problem. And I'm sure Lionsgate wouldn't budge on that front because then it becomes a huge issue. So I'm sure it's, who knows without seeing the movie. I think without seeing the movie, I don't even think the article's worth anything. And I don't mean that as an insult to the guy who wrote it, but it's meaningless to write similarities to another film without visually. It's a visual medium.
Yeah.
And unless I can see that movie
to see how close
and
it is.
And there's also like a question of ownership of story. Like, everyone can do Romeo and Juliet, but if you change a certain amount of things, it's no longer Romeo and Juliet. It becomes your own piece again. Creative property rights are so weird that I can't keep up with them a lot of the time. But this isn't the first time that this has come up because the same thing came up back in the 90s with Last Broadcast, which I actually wrote about last week. I did an article on Fango of the best found footage films, and I put that on there. And
I've never seen that one either.
It's so good. Well, it's mid-range. Okay, I won't say it's so good. When I saw it, when it first came out, it was so innovative and inventive and smart. But I mean, at the same time, it is a low-budget film, so it's got some very glaring flaws to it. But I could see when Blair Witch came out, everybody was immediately like, oh, you just stole that from Last Broadcast. Well, kind of. There are certain elements that you can definitely see were taken from Last Broadcast, but it's not an entirely organic idea that they stole. It's not. Is
the argument it's because they're both found foot? Like in the Last Broadcast, did they go into the woods looking for a witch?
No.
Then I mean,
it's almost like you're taking the idea, the format at an early stage. So I agree. I think there's free license there. Yeah,
you can argue back to Cannibal Holocaust.
I got to go back and watch Last Broadcast.
I don't think this plagiarism. This wouldn't be Killer POV without one pretentious drop, which is Goddard, by way of Jim Jarmusch, best quote about filmmaking, which I really believe it's not where you lift it from, it's where you lift it to. And that is like, basically, when you're making a film, you can't look at Scorsese and all those guys. They have 1,000,001 film references. And Tarantino, my God.
I mean,
Tarantino takes something that to somebody else was nothing. Like Carradine is no longer at all relevant to society. And then you pluck him, you put him back as the star of you make him Bill of Kill Bill, and suddenly it's relevant again. So it's like, I would be against it if I knew that these two guys sat there and go, well, let's rip off this movie and make it. I don't think they would have done that.
Yeah, that's the thing.
They seem far too creative
I mean, knowing we know James quite well, and I know Lee a little bit, but it's like, I can't see those two dudes sitting there and being like, let's
take it.
Though it does explain why they didn't make a sequel. They wanted to run before it caught up to them.
Lee was there all the way through 4 at least. Yeah, as a
really?
writer. Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I don't know. It's an interesting argument.
I'd love to see it. I would say this. If you have a copy of this film, if anyone knows how to get this, we would love to watch
look
it.
at it. We'll watch them back
and discuss
to back
it again.
And see what we can see.
Yeah, I mean, it would be interesting.
Yeah, and check out Frank's article from Judge for Yourself on unseen films, or just, you could probably just Google search.
And even though this is more of a footnote to the conversation, but if you go to our Facebook page at the moment, I just posted a Vice article, which I thought was interesting because it was showing kind of how we're talking about how Italy might have ripped off people or Turkish Star Wars. It's also subgroups, like a Christian version of Paranormal Activity called The Lock-In, I believe, where they believe demons come out of pornography, which is awesome. Yeah, I wish that was the case. It would, life would be so much more fulfilling. But it was interesting looking at it and realizing, that is one way to bankroll an idea. Is just like, I'm going to take everything that worked in that format, and all I'm going to do is put my little slant on it, whether it was like Republican ideology or Christianity or whatever. Yeah, and it might just be as successful, but within your subgroup. I think they're only doing it through their website, which is interesting. They've made that choice to only sell it.
$7.99 for sale on their website.
Wow.
So, but it's interesting. I mean, it looked terrible, to me, but it also...
The article you posted is like...
It's pretty funny.
Is this the room?
Yeah, it was kind of weird.
I could see that.
I don't know if Vice watched it.
The trailer itself was definitely like, what are you holding? It's a nudie mag. I mean, it was kind of so...
Why, Lisa, why? I don't know. But no, I do find that interesting. That's all it takes sometimes for somebody to make a successful film, unfortunately, is to just take something that already worked and put their little slant on it.
Right. What's funny is that, I saw that trailer and I'm like, I don't want to watch that.
Of course,
but we had a bunch of comments underneath of people being
it's
like,
interesting.
I have to see this.
Show that at Jump Cut. And I'm like, now you have to see it. It's like...
Well, again, it's like that in a group would probably be entertaining. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if you watch that at home alone, you would die.
I mentioned this on the Facebook page. A couple, I guess it was, not a couple, I guess it was about 10 years ago now when I first started with Fango. We had one of the distribution companies had sent us like a glut of these Christian horror films. So, and I had just gotten there. So they were like, you watch these, Becca. So I watched and reviewed like 3 of them back to back. One was called Evil Behind You. And you always know that the evil in it, there's no ghosts or anything like that. It's always going to be Satan. It's always Satan or a demon.
Right.
And they were always teens who were struggling with, do I do the right thing or do I go have sex and debauchery and all this stuff? But some of them definitely had like big budgets, which was shocking. But I guess
that's the funny thing, that Friday 13th, how people go back and look at them and go, wow, this is actually a very conservative viewpoint, because the couples get killed if they smoke. Yeah. But it's interesting that they're not ever made by conservative. They're always made by liberals who didn't get that until it was too late after the movie. So it would have been fun to see the Christian, version of those films of Friday, how they would approach those same topics. I'd be curious.
They're having sex. The demon lives and lives.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird, but
and I saw. I mean, because once you posted it, there were like several of my Facebook friends that kept reposting it.
Oh, really?
And someone was just like, the sheer irony of this Christian Paranormal Activity when it's. And this is quoting the person saying, when it's fairly obvious that the 2 leads are gay.
Oh, openly gay. That's whatever. Yeah, Daniel, it was a Daniel.
Somebody, I can't remember who, but somebody posted and was like, the irony there. So
yeah, I mean, it is interesting how people can profit, I guess, off a formula. And I think, Paranormal Activity and Blair Witch, that is the easiest one because it's the easiest to make.
Yeah, of course.
You know what I mean? So that's probably one of the reasons. Good luck.
I don't know. I was looking at the behind the scenes stills from that, and they had fancy directing jackets, like where the whole crew had jackets. We've never had jackets.
That's true. So, we're not legit.
That's what they did
Elric, we need fancy directing
Killer
jackets.
Killer
POV
directing jackets.
Yeah, Killer POV directing jackets.
But I do think the plagiarist thing's saying to watch how that unfolds with everything, because everything's just easier to figure out.
Yeah.
And so you have to be kind of dumb now to do that.
Yeah.
And if it's unconsciously, then it's unfortunate. But when it's clearly, like Shia LaBeouf or Spider Babied, those are conscious decisions by people to rip people off.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's all there, there's not much more you can say. And they're getting caught. So it's a good thing. It strikes me as a positive that it's going to keep us all in check.
Yeah.
Yeah, this, well, maybe when we get another fellow journalist, this might be a good topic for like a more expanded topic. On
I would love to have Drew Daywald on to this one to discuss how he was presented with, hey, this guy made your film, your film.
Yeah, it
he
must
remade
be
it.
weird.
Yeah, that's a weird thing because it's like, in Drew's case, he didn't profit off a Bedfellow. So it's not like, it's not even a financial issue. It's a creative and artistic one that's being stolen from, you know what I mean? Like,
well, especially if that person profited. Like, imagine if somebody watched that
profited off
and
it,
hadn't seen Drew's, and we're like, this is genius. Here's a feature.
Yeah.
And that's when I have a major issue with this stuff. And including the soul issue. Let's say they did. That'd be a bummer to think some dude in Australia had lost his house and had all these. I mean, that's the dark side of that story. We don't know, so I don't even want to get into it. But let's say he was completely ripped off. What a bummer. You know, kind of shitty for him. Yeah. So if you're listening, sorry, mate.
We'd still love to see your film, so send us one.
All right, anything else before we bring our guest on?
No, let's go ahead and get him in here.
All right, stand by. Okay, so we're back, and we are joined by a very, 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 three veries, special guest.
That's a lot of varies.
A lot of varies.
And one special.
I think very highly of this guest, so I want the intro to be epic. So, filmmaker, writer-director of Dread, based on the Clive Barker story. Also the director of Cassadaga, the upcoming Paymon, Anthony DiBlasi.
Hello.
What's up?
Thanks for having me, guys.
Welcome.
You can't say Cassadaga without me thinking of the Talladega car racing. Every time the word comes out, I think of a comedy with Talladega.
I'm so glad you said that, because last night I kept saying, I got to watch Cassadaga tonight. And Dave kept going, isn't that about racing? And I was like, no, Dave, that's Talladega Nights. And it's not even in the same decade.
Yeah.
See, now that does make sense. It does sound like
they're probably both in Florida.
I think they're both in Florida, yeah.
That's what it is. So welcome Anthony to the show. We've been friends for quite a while. My nickname for him is Anthony Awesome, by the way. I don't know why.
That is my official. Yeah, you called me that like the first day we met.
I think because I was super intimidated the first several times I met Anthony, and then I think I was super drunk. And I meant to say Anthony is awesome, and I was just like
trying to get into your pants.
He did get into my pants.
It worked. Nickname a dude, awesome, and then that'll get you in for sure.
Yeah, you got me in.
That's all it takes. Once you drop the A word, I'm easy.
But no, in all sincerity, I was super intimidated, and then I started calling you Anthony Awesome, I think, because of alcohol. And then you were a super sweetheart, so I was like, all right, this guy's all right.
Still trying to get into your pants.
My nickname for Rob was tight ass Rob, because it was so cute.
Sphincter Rob.
Sphincter Rob.
AJ's on the show.
No more friends of Rob. This is getting...
All right, so let's get serious here. So,
let me change the subject.
Yeah, quickly. So before we tackle some of the stuff that you directed, I kind of want to go back a little bit to the beginning, and obviously when I first met you, you were doing a lot of stuff with Clive. I think I think you brought me to a screening of Midnight Meat Train.
Yeah,
I remember that very vaguely. But let's go before all that, just so our listeners get to know a little bit about you. First thing I like to ask is earliest horror recollections. What's the first thing you remember about the horror genre that made you a fan of this stuff? What scared you?
Well, my dad, he's an older guy, because my parents were 20 years apart. My father was like a big film buff. So I remember like when VHS was invented, my dad rented Nightmare on Elm Street and like Creepers. Not Night of the Creeps. It was the one with
Creepers, which is Dario Argento's
Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, phenomenal.
Yeah. And Donald Pleasance is in that.
Yeah, that's the one.
I was like 4 or 5, right? So I don't know. And I watched those movies with him. I was like, but I had been watching like rated R films since I was like, 2 years old. But he just never had that. He grew up in a different era, So it was like they never monitored what I was watching. They'd sit me down. So like, one of my favorite movies is Once Upon a Time in America. I watched that when I was like 5 years old. It was like the first naked woman I saw.
Wow.
On, film. And I was like, and it molded like my,
Did your dad talk to you about this stuff, or
no,
were you figuring it out?
Movies. They're movie, it's like, so I just grew up, I was watching
not real kid.
Just like, but when I was that young, I wanted to get in special makeup effects. So, which is why after college, I kind of, in college, I did some makeup, and you always want to be a director. But when I was a kid, I always wanted to get in special effects and makeup effects.
So was that like your first interest in filmmaking, the filming side of things?
Yeah,
like,
totally. That's why I gravitated to like movies like Fright Night and Once Upon American Werewolf in London and Lost Boys. More of the monster movie that had that huge element. And back then, that's why like when DVD and then Blu-ray came out, all the making of features. Like back then, you had to like catch a special on TV or HBO or PBS, like
if you
the
were
making
lucky.
of Thing on PBS.
You know what's weird about that? I used to kill and track those things down like on VHS any way I could, and then as soon as the making ofs become standard, I hardly watch them ever.
Yeah,
and I can't explain it.
That
It's almost
used to
like
be my thrill of Fango and
exactly. It was like the most
that
exciting
they always
thing.
had the little section where they would show, like Tom Savini's going to show us all how to do a cast and things like that, and I would get so excited about this. But now that it's digitized, I never watch the making of. I'm like, oh look, it's the making of Battleship.
It could just be because there's an expectation to do them, which isn't as fun.
When you go out of your way to make an extensive documentary that's on one of these discs, that's a little more appealing than a 15-minute, EPK sort of thing.
Yeah.
I still love special features, but I do tend to notice, like with Blu-rays nowadays, as long as it looks awesome, the movie, because it's like, well, I just want the movie to look really good. Like, I
think the extras now are made kind of by professionals. Like, I mean, guys who have to do a lot of them to get by, but they all start to look the same. They're all against the same kind of background. Whereas when you went back to, say, the Dawn of the Dead one, which I think was one of the first ones, right? They're just they're at the place. They're right there with them. It feels like you're a participant rather than getting the play-by-play.
It was unfiltered. You're watching.
Yeah, we know guys who are special.
And they have to do a lot of them.
That's all they do. Is like
by.
Each week they do a new film.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, it's cool.
Like Scream Factory and like some of these companies that do it for retro titles that we love. Like I'm still a sucker for that. I'll watch their special features all the time.
Yeah, no, and some are great.
I do. I watch. Yeah. I'll buy movies that I don't like to watch the special features on. Like I bought Man of Steel, which I was not like a big fan of the movie. I was disappointed by it, but I watched every minute of special features. It made me appreciate the movie more.
Yeah, me
but
too.
I do that. I do that. I'll buy. I love special features.
Yeah,
too.
I was disappointed by Man of Steel, but the reason I brought it is because somebody told me that Zack Snyder does like a video commentary through the whole thing.
Yeah.
So I bought it because I'm like, all right, Zack, explain yourself. I want to know.
I want to know.
So what was the beginning in terms of filmmaking for you? What did you go to school for, and how did that kind of segue into your interest in filmmaking? Because again, you said you started more towards special effects rather than directing, or did you always kind of think like, well, I definitely want to direct and tell my own stories?
I think by the time I was I did a lot in art and music in high school. I always wanted to, once I hit a certain age, I wanted to direct, You get to a certain point, you're like, well, can't I just control everything? And just, it gives you a kind of singular vision of something. But in high school, knowing that I'd eventually go to film school, I did a lot of art and music and then went to Emerson for film. So it was like in Boston, it was a film degree. But it's funny because in college, I commuted to college. I didn't live there. So my experience was different. And I started to have, that kind of thing like, well, maybe I should do more makeup just in case. Because makeup's a trade. I was good at it. And it's like when you're an unproven director, it's like, well, you can make short films and stuff. But I knew it's something that a trade you can fall back on. Like I can make this with my hands.
Yeah, people always hire makeup. I mean, it's a little harder.
I know half
to.
a dozen off the top of my head who are unemployed right now.
So when I first got to, Emerson had a great program to go to California to get an internship, and that's what I did my last semester. And when I was there, I was interning with Marvel.
Wow,
and that's a hell of an
pretty
internship.
awesome. Yeah,
it was so boring because they had just completed production, or they were in production on Spider-Man. They had nothing, so it was a tiny office. There was, I worked with Kevin and Avi and Ari. And I made packets. I actually wondered the other day, because they said they were looking at Johnny Depp for Doctor Strange. And I was like, I remember making because I was great at making these like actor packets where you like look through all the comics, you get like just a presentation of it. And that's what I did like all day long. I was so bored because there was nothing going on, there. It was before they were busy. And I was like, I have free time. I'd like to get into something with horror. So that's how I sought out Clive.
How does one seek out Clive? Because I mean, by that time had he finished Lord of the Illusions?
Oh yeah, it was
at the end of his film.
He hadn't been. This was in 2002, so he had 98 was Lord of Illusions, and
Was this like Masters of Horror range? That would have been like 2003, 2004.
Yeah, it was around there. And I had asked my advisor, I was like, is there anything, it was funny because the Nightmare on Elm Street box set had just came out. I bought that and I was watching all the special features. And in LA, like at our, dorm at the Oakwoods. And I was always a fan of Clive's movies, but I wasn't like a fan. I hadn't read any of his books. I hadn't, I liked Hellraiser. I loved Candyman was definitely kind of one of my favorite films. Not one he directed, but still I think his best
one of the best from the 90s too.
And when I watched The Nightmare on Elm Street, they had that great documentary. I mean, it was hours and hours in that box set. So much. They talked to everyone.
Was that Never Sleep Again?
There was
Not Never Sleep.
No,
it was before that.
This is way before.
Yeah.
It had all the making ofs for each movie, and they talked to a lot of filmmakers, and Clive was on there a lot. And I was like, I like this guy. I like what he has to say. He was, I felt like a kindred spirit. So I had called my advisor, and I was like, is there, the handful of horror people in LA, I didn't think they'd be looking for an internship, and I didn't need the credits, but I was like, I'm not going to waste the opportunity. I'm here. I only was taking one class, and it was a horror cinema class, actually. So I was in it, I was in it. I was feeling it. So she threw out Wes and John Carpenter, and Clive was on there, and Joe Daly, who was my producing partner now for a long period of time. He had went to Emerson for 1 year, and I saw that like on his kind of resume, and I was like, well, that's my in. So she gave me his number, and I started talking to Joe, and we got along, and eventually they brought me in. But when I went in and met Clive, we just kind of hit it off. It was like we just had a lot of the similar interests. We both like porn a lot, both like comic books a lot.
Did you like the same kind of pornography as Clive? I think that's the question they want to know.
Bestiality.
Yeah. Obviously.
We have different tastes in porn, but that's what we do together. But by porn.
And like when you first kind of got there, what were they kind of doing with, because when I first met you, the plan was to adapt and try to make films of all the Books of Blood stuff. That's where they were at. What was Clive up to at the period that you started working for him? Was this before that?
Yes. We started that. Joe and I started that endeavor. Clive had taken a sabbatical to work on his children's fantasy books.
Right.
Called Aberrat.
Aberrat.
So, and he was kind of totally fed up with Hollywood by the time Lord of Illusions came out. So he had not written any of the books yet, but had painted all these pictures, 100 paintings, and called his agent at ICM at the time. It's like, come and see this world. All I have is like the title, Aberrat, and all these paintings. And they were like, wow, this is amazing. Let's get the studios up here to look at it. And again, he hadn't written a book yet. And all the studios came up to the house. And at that period of time, it was pretty amazing because he had a house in Beverly Hills. It was just filled with paintings, like every wall of these giant Aberrat paintings. And they sold it to Disney. And that's like right when I came on board, like right after they had sold it to Disney. So he had the task of, well, now you got to write 4 books. So that was it. His film,
with the intention that they would be filmed eventually, and they haven't
turned into films.
Did they not?
Well, it was just it's the curse of the studio system. He eventually finished the first book, probably in a year and a half, and then they were like, well, should we start the movie? And they hired, I think, a screenwriter at the time, and then he was like, no, this is too much pressure. Let me do it. Let me finish the second book. Did the second book, didn't like it, tossed it out, and started again. And then the second book was great. But he was painting and writing. So there was no one to do the film side. And that's where like Joe and I kind of took over and started pitching all his properties around town, trying to set up a fund where we could turn the Books of Blood into a collection of films.
Right. And I assume that he had the film rights to all those stories.
He did, yeah. I mean, there were a few that were hanging around town that it had been, like Thief of Always had been set up at, but that was, again, another children's fantasy one, but had been set up at Warner Brothers at some point. But that's when, and a funny thing happened because that Aberrat sale, because it was a really big sale, it got Clive a lot of heat in the town. Because literally like every head of each studio came up to his house to look at his paintings. So now they all knew who Clive Barker was, and they all had a different, oh, this isn't the Hellraiser guy. This is so much more. So then Joe and I ended up selling like properties everywhere, and they were then developing films like Dread at Fox and
I remember that,
and Midnight Meat Train and several others, Damnation Game, and then people were like, wait, we don't want to make these kind of movies at all.
Right.
These are dark and strange and taboo, and no, this is not for us. So then and this is a period of 5 years that it really took to kind of make him make his name branded in the horror market again, kind of get it away from the studios and in the independent world where we could then make Midnight Meat Train and
right, exactly the way you want to make them.
Yeah, and for people who wanted to make his movies, you know, like
I'm just surprised that like, because like in the early to mid '80s, like with Stephen King stuff, it's like they, obviously Carrie was a big hit and The Shining and all that, but like there was a point where like I just remember every week there was like another Stephen King movie in development, and I was always surprised considering the body of work that Clive had built up to at that point, that the Books of Blood didn't already have a bunch of movies made.
It's so much darker, like his world is dark. And one of the things I was thinking, and it's got to be tough, and we'll get to like actually adapting his work, but one of the reasons I think some of the adaptations, it's hard is because the wealth of his imagination is like unparalleled. Like in the world of horror, I look at him as a voice and go, I don't think anyone touches him, just as a world.
Yeah.
And same, like I remember reading Weave World and going, oh God, it's like you just invented a new place that I don't live in. Stephen King's your world.
Yeah.
And something weird comes into it.
Yeah.
So it's very understandable to middle America.
Yeah.
So with Clive, it's like even like Damnation Game was the first book I read, and I really liked it. And I could see that as a movie because it's kind of simple. But anything beyond that, like when you go to Nightbreed, imagine somebody trying to adapt Nightbreed. Like, Jesus. Like, he knows who they are. Like you said, he probably has painted a biography of every character. Yeah. No one's going to do it like he can. Did he consciously, I know after having, bad experiences, did he make the decision after Lord of Illusions, like, I don't even want to direct again?
He did. Like,
okay, he had choice.
He had fallen, definitely, Nightbreed was like a really crusher for him. Because he's like an artist, and you're trying to work with executives that are really like these. He had some Texan cowboy producer that was all about on Nightbreed that just crushed his soul. It's like it becomes really hard. And then Lord of Illusions was just another similar kind of like, how do I survive this? Probably like how George Romero thinks about working in the studio system. It's not easy to kind of conceit for no good reason a lot of the times.
And I guess your identity, like, what are you as an artist? I saw him on that, I think it was the extra from the...
Midnight Meat Train, the one I sent you?
Yeah, he has a good line where he says, look, I'm a painter and a writer who feels he got lucky to make a couple movies.
Yeah.
And I think whereas people like us might be going, well, I'm a filmmaker, and if I don't make films, I'm a failure.
Yeah.
He has all these other avenues, these other streams. So it's, it makes you feel less bad about it. Because he's just, you wanted to just keep seeing more movies.
Yeah.
Nightbreed sequel is still, to me, like, of everything in the history of cinema, not having a sequel to Nightbreed, the kid, when I saw that, I might have been 11 or 12, nothing I wanted more on earth. And I just assumed it would come the next year, because I don't know anything about politics or Hollywood. I'm in New Zealand watching Nightbreed going, oh, that was the best horror movie I've ever seen, and the ending is the most, like, sequel-friendly ending.
Yeah.
So I just assumed next year I'd go to the video store and it'd be there. Never came.
I've been waiting for decades for Thief of Always, because I read that when I was a kid and I loved that one so much. And there's always been rumors of a movie for Thief of Always, and it's never come. So
Thief of Always was always definitely my favorite novel of Clive's, and I had adapted it at one point. It has literally been sold to every studio. Universal was so close to making that film. This goes for a lot of Clive stuff. He's just had a string of luck that's been bizarre. Thief of Always was so close to being made at Universal. Sondheim is like Clive's god. He loves Sondheim. Sondheim had hired Sondheim to turn Thief of Always into an animated musical. The whole Bible was done. Every frame of the movie was drawn. I've seen it. It's gorgeous. Sondheim wrote music for it.
Wow.
Then this thing called CGI came out, this technology, and they were like, Universal was like, we want this to be our first CG animated film. Killed it. Killed the movie. It got flung to another department. It got embroiled in politics, and it died. And that was really sad for Clive, because it was like his hero was making music for his favorite, for something that and he talks about Thief of Always a lot because he sold Thief of Always they didn't want him to do anything but horror. And he was like, I'm going to write this book. Don't pay me at all. I'll pay me $1 for the rights, but I get to keep the residuals. And to this day, it's the book he makes the most money on. So it was a huge success for them. And they were like, fuck, that was a stupid deal they made.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, why he did Abra and stuff, because he has a love for children, novels and stuff.
Which would have opened a whole another world if he had made even one great children's film out of his material. What of his books and short stories do you think would be could make a really terrific film that hasn't really been touched? Of the short story, given how hard they are to adapt for a different kind of voice, is there one that you've always gone, Damnation Game or something, where you could really see it as a...
Well, Damnation Game is still in development. And, I'd say the closest to seeing, in terms of a bigger budget Clive Barker film, definitely Damnation Game is the closest to getting made. I would love to see In the Hills of Cities, which is the short story in the Books of Blood. And at this point, Yuhei actually adapted it at one time for a Japanese anime film. But In the Hills of Cities is about, I believe they're in Prague, but they're in like a countryside that's not populated, and there's these two lovers driving cross country, and it's kind of like a Wicker Man feel, but they come across a town, these two rival towns that build the people themselves into giant people, and they battle, and it's horribly bloody. So it's like all these towns, these men of the town, they string themselves together in one giant man.
Clive Barker's Voltron.
It's just a flesh of people. And then the other town does it too, and they fight. And these two lovers driving cross country stumble upon this ritual they do like every, 25 years or something.
He seems like a real, working for him, even if it was initially as just an intern, obviously grew into something more. He seems like from every interview I've seen, he seems terrifically honest, terrifically like a straight, this is what you're getting.
Yeah.
He's not, is that what it was like working with him? Does he hold back who he is, or is he very
he's
upfront person?
Yeah, he's very open. And he was always open, about his sexuality publicly before it, when he didn't have to be, he's always been very open. I think that had to do with his upbringing and having to hide. Then at a certain point, he was like, fuck this. I'm just going to be open about everything for the most part, I think.
Yeah, that seems something that Hollywood isn't in general.
Yeah.
People, it seems like even John Carpenter or something, sometimes seems like you're just getting a 90th of who they are, how they present themselves. Whereas whenever you've seen them interviewed, it just seems like that's who I am. Yeah. And it seems like a better way to go, because then people don't dig, because you're giving it all.
Yeah, I've always respected, I've seen Clive do a bunch of Fangoria Weekend of Horror shows, and the Q&As with him at these shows are fantastic.
He's so witty and just has
very honest.
Such a great rapport with the audience.
I remember one of my favorite bits was somebody had asked about the long rumored Pinhead versus Michael Myers on the Hot on the Heels of Freddy versus Jason.
Yeah.
And he flat out was like, I was stoked. I was going to write it. Carpenter was going to make it. But then, the Accods, they think Michael Myers fucking Hamlet or something. And he's too good to be with Pinhead. So fuck that. And I was like, oh, wow. Okay. That's why that didn't happen. I just revisited Midnight Meat Train, which I loved when I saw it, but I love it just as much now. And speaking of honesty, I watched it with the commentary with Clive and the director, which I'd never seen before. And that's a pretty honest conversation about that. Since you were there, can you talk a little bit about the frustration of why it didn't come out the way it was supposed to? Because essentially, the movie itself came out the way it was supposed to. It's just that they were promised a big release, 2,000 screens or something like that. And then from what I understand, there was a changing of the guards over at Lionsgate.
And it got a smaller release.
A much smaller.
That is one of those, it's just the way Hollywood goes. And it's one of those moments that I think that, we had set up and you get the behind the scenes story. I'll tell you all the details of it was a literal journey of 5 years to get to that point of getting Midnight Meat Train to production.
Yeah.
And after that, it was to springboard Dread, Book of Blood. But we were talking about higher budget levels, and eventually we made them.
Yeah.
And then continuous. We had a lot of, scripts done. So Midnight Meat Train was like, okay, we're mainstream. Like Candyman kind of released, Lord of Illusions, 2,500 screens, big studio. The movie cost like $15 million. It was not small at all. And then it was just change. The production was challenging as any of them. But then it was just a changing of the guard at Lionsgate. And we started to get that. We didn't quite know what was going on. And we had a release date, and then they pushed our release date by 2 months. And I was like, well, that's not a good sign. Like we obviously knew this wasn't a good sign. And we're like, so what's really going on? And Lakeshore was like, oh, it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're Lionsgate's positioning it in a better slot. And then it got to that slot, and they pushed it again. And then we were like, okay, so then we started to get the details of what was going on. And it went quite public at the time because Clive.
Yeah.
He was very, openly talking about it.
Yeah.
And it was just that. It was just the new guy, when Peter Block had left, and the new guy came in who he just came off the tail, he had just done Juno. Mm-hmm. And from our understanding, and Clive had conversations with him, that they wanted to kind of, horror is just the bastard stepchild of every studio.
Yeah.
Even New Line, it's like they moved to
the one that pays all the bills half the time.
But they don't want to talk about it. They want to make
it.
art films.
Yeah.
And a lot of people do regard horror just like one step above porn, which is weird to me. I don't understand. Mm-hmm. Even though, A-list filmmakers can make one and win an Oscar and
yeah.
And then it's like, oh, it's okay for a little bit.
It's like what you do on the weekends. Like you sleaze it with horror. But during your day job, you better be making Juno.
Yeah, you better be making Juno. So then it was, and they had dumped, and we kind of said it out loud. We're like, listen, those 8 films that were supposed to come out on their slate, they're all going to get dumped. And they did over the next year and a half, 2 years. And like Repo was one of those.
Yeah, the shitty. I remember me and Brian Collins drove like an hour away to go see Blood Creek, the Joel Schumacher zombie Nazi movie for $1 at $1 theater.
Well, yeah.
And that was the weekend it came out, and it was at $1 theater.
Midnight had that interesting spin when it happened to a lot of them. And if you're the public, you don't understand it, is that Lionsgate had a output deal with Universal for Midnight Meat Train, which said essentially that, they had to release Midnight Meat Train theatrically, so they dropped it to like 200 screens. Mm-hmm. That was their minimum. But there was an output deal essentially that said if Midnight Meat Train made a certain amount of money theatrically, they would start, Lionsgate would start, or, I'm paraphrasing, but this is essentially that Lionsgate would start having to pay out money to Universal and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And that's, I think, the same thing with a lot of these deals that they make. And so to make sure that does not happen, they release it in $1 theaters.
Oh, wow. That's a weird...
What a scumbag movie.
Yeah, that's a weird twist.
Because also Midnight Meat Train was getting a lot of hype at the time because a lot of the websites were getting behind it.
That was a big deal. As it came out, Fango, we immediately had you guys on Fango Radio at the time because I was working for that at the time, and I remember researching it, and we saw it in a theater in New York, and I don't think it was $1 theater. It might have been a little bit higher.
Oh, well, because we were on the cover of Fango.
Yeah, you guys were on the cover.
Running trailers in the theaters. It was like...
Yeah.
It was coming out.
It was a big deal. I remember them announcing it in probably Fango, like the Terry Teletype, whatever. And it was like, Midnight Meat Train's coming, and this is the first of several Books of Blood movies. And you're like, fuck yeah, man, we're about to get a shit ton of Clive Barker movies. That's awesome. And then it was just so disappointed when
Well, and at the time we were already kind of in pre-production on Book of Blood and Dread. Mm-hmm. So both those films were made, and then Dread, I made for a fraction of the budget of what it was originally supposed to be made for. But unfortunately, that backlash of it's hard to get your foot into that mainstream. So the company we made it with then had a much harder time because if Midnight Meat Train had come out, it would have done well. It was tracking exceptionally well for them, and it would have done even well enough. Even if it did poorly, it would have been good for us.
Yeah.
It would have changed that platform. And then it just, that's what happens. It really took a shift. You probably would have a lot more Clive films if that one event had not occurred.
Yeah. Such a bummer.
What about the process of like working for a guy, a legend, that kind of pressure, and then adapting one of his pieces for yourself. How much was he a very open collaborator in that way? Did he say, "Hey, just go write and see what comes back with"?
Was he a voice in the background, kind of directing?
He was kind of a go write it kind of guy, just because he was so especially embroiled in his novels and stuff.
And was that the one that you wanted? I mean, sorry to jump.
Well, was Dread because you adapted a few of his things? Was Dread the first one? And also because I know Dread was also floating around town, and there were several scripts for it, if I'm not mistaken.
There were several scripts for it, and Pig Blood Blues was the first one I had adapted, and then that's how I got like an agent in the town and stuff, and then I was producing Midnight Meat Train, and when we got this deal with Matador, it's like, well, I'm not going to wait because Pig Blood got set up somewhere else, but it was taking a long time. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, let's do, and by this point we had gotten Dread back from Fox, because when it was at Fox, there were several different writers on it.
Was Fox trying? Is this true? Was Fox trying to make it like a PG-13 movie or something?
Oh, yeah, they were trying.
That's what I
PG-13,
heard.
PG-13, like mainstream kind of, and it didn't start that way. It was part of that process. That was like, we don't really want to make this kind of movie, and like we don't want this meat stuff in it. It's weird, and they're like, it needs to be a fun college movie, and and
Clive Barker's Dread, the fun college movie.
That was the tagline, the fun college film, and it goes down that path of getting more homogenized. As
it doesn't end that way.
No. So then it came back to us, and we were like, well, let's do this as the second picture for. It probably would have been Pig Blood, but that was tied up, so. I adapted something that I consider very close to Clive's.
Mm-hmm. And how did you? I mean, you had wanted to direct at this point, and I don't know if there were other things you were interested in, but how did you get in the position to be the one to direct Dread, the one you adapted, and also simultaneously? I mean, once word got out that these were all being made, were you seeing a lot of other directors coming in being like, "Oh, I want to tackle this, I want to tackle that," like because he's got a fan base that I imagine. Amongst filmmakers. So was there anybody interesting that came in that like wanted to take a crack at it?
Well, I think, we got so sick. Joe and I got so sick of developing in the studios that when we finally got a breath of independent film, and even working with Lakeshore, because they are at heart an independent studio, and they've certainly gotten much bigger over the years. Mm-hmm. But getting a fund that we could make films, and then Jorge Saralegui, who was our other producer and partner at the time for this Midnight Picture Show thing, we were like, we didn't want to bring in too many outsiders. So at that point, we had all produced. We were the creative side of every movie that got made. We saw it from development to production. So at that point, I was just like, well, I'm directing the next movie. Mm-hmm. And they were like, awesome. So that's, and I had certainly paid my dues like on the development and producing side, and they all trusted me. And Dread was an extremely easy process. We had a great time doing it.
Mm-hmm. What's it like waiting for, say, that first test screening with Clive or someone who the material originally sprung from? Was that a strange process at that point, or?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. But we had had a good relationship, and he was really happy with the script, and I don't know, he had always been so like supportive of it not having to be, and he tells that to anyone who works with him, don't do this because I did this already, do something else.
Yeah, make it something unique, your own.
Which I believe in too. It's like, which I'm never quite bothered when they're doing remakes, because I'm like, well, the original is, it is. It always
still exists. It'll always be there.
I'd like it when they change things. Do it differently.
I think that's the fun, and maybe you can answer this in terms of the challenge, but I think it's fun when you have a novel and you're trying to truncate it to a feature. It's sometimes you lose a lot of important stuff, but I think it's more interesting to take a short and then expand upon it, because then as a filmmaker or a writer, you're able to put yourself into it, because it's like, as long as I stay true to the short story, I can expand this and add my own 2 cents to it, which, So,
clearly Candyman did that, obviously, in a big way. Yeah. It's a very different story.
I mean, that is, I think, the best part of adapting a short story. And it's fun because you're like, how do I get as much of this in? If you love it, you're like, how do I get all of this in there and expand on those characters and flesh them out? And, I did things, certainly I did like one major thing different than the short story that some people were like, what the fuck? You know, and can I say it? Are you gonna put it out? Which is keeping the villain alive, because I was like, I'm not killing him. Because I feel like that wasn't a justifiable end to at least the story that was set up, you know, that, like this cathartic experience that he took to the next level. But yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the characters that I was very happy how they turned out with, and still very happy with, was Abby in the film, who had the birthmark, and she wasn't in the short story.
Yeah,
but it was really important for me when I was like, I need more characters, and I was like, how can I? Because what Clive was so clever about in the short story was making examples of what dread is. Dread is not fear. Dread is not being scared. Dread is being afraid of being afraid. It's something that wells up inside you over time. And that was why the meat scene was crucial, and why every studio was like, this isn't scary. It's going to be scary to vegetarians. I'm like, no, that has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
Because that was the definition that he laid in so well into the short story. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. It was a perfect representation of dread. Sitting in a room with a well-cooked piece of meat, that's not scary at all. But it's a test of wills. You sit there, and then suddenly you're like, this guy's not going to let me out. But this meat, he wants me to eat this piece of meat. Fuck that guy. I'm not like, I don't eat meat. I'm a vegetarian. I have my reasons. And in the film, I gave reasons that were different. You know, well, I explained, because in the book he doesn't get into it. But then that meat starts to rot. The longer you wait, the worse it gets. It was perfect. So for me, I wanted to get a physical representation of dread, and I felt like that birthmark was that you're born with something where you wear this fear on your face, that every time you have to meet someone, every time you have to walk out your door, you have to take that breath and be like, okay, here's another day. I got to get stared at all day long. So it's like this interpretation of something extreme physically. So that the character that's really dear to me is that one.
Right on. Yeah, I'm not just saying this because you're here, but that and Midnight Meat Train are, I think, some of the best adaptations of Clive's work since Hellraiser, since his first one.
I haven't seen Books of Blood. I don't know who made that.
Book of Blood was done by John Harrison, who had done the Dune miniseries for sci-fi stuff, and
Romero's composer. He's the composer of Day of the Dead.
Interesting.
Yeah. So after doing Dread, I mean, because Dread ended up coming out through After Dark, and at that point, were they still doing the 8 Films to Die For theatrically, or because the way I saw it with you at a midnight screening at the New Bev, which, by the way, I like the movie, but it's a tad depressing to see at midnight.
Oh God! I was like,
"What? Go home and go to bed."
It's
Rob.
like 2 a.m. and we were all just like throwing our hands up in the air, like, "Man,
not a midnight movie. But
I'm gonna go to sleep and cry myself."
Just not the kind of movie you want to watch at midnight.
But so what was kind of the effects of the release itself? I mean, it seemed like, at least critically, the people that were horror fans and saw it kind of dug it. I mean, did it open doors for you? Did it open, because I know for a while you were going to do Pig Blood Blues right after that.
Yes, I mean, it certainly opened doors. You know, I mean, once you make a film, it was critically reviewed well. I think fans, to me, I mean, it shouldn't have really come out with the 8 Films to Die For. It wasn't made for that, and that was a negative pickup. And frankly, that kind of movie is not their fan base.
Yeah.
They do make fun college films.
Yeah,
a little bit more extreme, but fun college films. Now, did they chunk it in? Because I know their marketing's always a little funky, where they don't focus on one film; they'll focus on
the festival,
on the slate of films.
And it got. I mean, Dread got a lot of great attention by them, and something that never got a Blu-ray release, where other films that were more pan got Blu-ray releases because it hit more to their target audience. And Dread had won the best independent feature that year at the Spike Scream Awards. Yet it didn't get the Blu-ray release.
And you had one of the kids from Twilight in there, Jackson.
Yeah. Jackson. I mean, it had they could have put Twilight, and they did. Twilight's Jackson Rathbone. But what was the question?
Well, I mean, what I was getting at is here's the interesting thing is, like, you make this, it's your debut feature. It's based on a well-received literary loved story, And what I think is interesting is I'm just curious what the next step was, because I know what it was. There's a point, I think Anthony disappeared for like 2 years, it seems, because you got the opportunity to make a film in Florida. Which was Cassadaga.
Yeah, why Florida?
And then you got to make another movie, and I was like, "Are you ever coming home?" And
I was
like,
never coming home.
I keep making movies here, so
Yeah.
Which I think is interesting, because it's like, you're getting the opportunity to direct, which is what you always wanted to do. So what was that process like? How did you end up, hooking up with this company that was doing these features out of Florida?
Well, certainly it was Dread. It was an independent company called Poileywood, who was Bruce Wood and Scott Poiley, who had written this script and had the money to make the film.
Cassadaga.
Yeah. And they saw Dread, and they, and this was, I think, just like, I don't know where I don't know if they got it from my agent, because I don't know if it had just come out. I don't know. But it wasn't long. I mean, I had not had a lot of time off, and they contacted my agent and was like, "Hey, can we come up and meet with them?" And so they flew out here and met. The only reason I go to Florida is because they're local there. They lived in Florida. All the money was coming from Florida, and Florida, you get a real bang for the buck. I mean, the incentive at the time was like 25%, and we paid pennies for locations, which goes really far. So it's like, you're able to make a movie that looks far beyond its budget.
Was that in the real town of Cassadaga, or were you?
We did. We shot in Cassadaga and around that area in various locations of like Sanford but it's all the Orlando area. And it's much different looking than I think everyone thinks it is. You think Orlando and Disney, but it's very, kind of bayou, swampy, and kind of small town kind of areas, and then also like affluent neighborhoods as well. But yeah, and then we finished Cassadaga, and before we had finished Cassadaga, they were like, "You know what? We want to make another one. Let's do it," because they had it was like their first independent film, and they had the bug, and they were good at getting the resources. Scott was great at getting the resources, and I was like, okay, but I was like, well, because Dread didn't open any doors for me in the mainstream cinema, because it's not a horror film, really. It's kind of a drama, but it's very psychological and heady. It's, it is horror. It's horrific. So it hits this middle ground where you're like, I don't know. But true horror fans will like it because because I'm taking it seriously. I'm like, hey, here's a horror movie. I'm not pandering to an audience. I'm trying to like tell a story that will stick with people. And so it didn't open. It really didn't open. Not maybe it would have, but it moved too slow when I jumped on Cassadaga, which I'm not a big fan of. Rob loves it. I'm not a big fan of Cassadaga. I'll say that. I don't mind saying that. I just don't. I'm not a huge fan of how that
the story or the process of making it, or
no, the process of making it was good because we did. But like I think we were trying to achieve a lot for what it was. There were a lot of locations, and then when I got in there, I said a couple things because the script was like 120 pages, and there were like 90 locations, and I was. When I met with them, I was like, we got to cut this down to like 30 locations.
Because they had no experience actually in production, right?
Yeah. They had, they had been writing a few things, and Scott had excellent producing experience, hands on, like what it really takes, kind of that like natural talent to put money together, which is the hardest thing. I couldn't do that. I can tell you, like if my friends or someone someone approaches you, like, want to produce my movie, I'm like, sure.
But that means that they just want you to make phone calls.
Like I'll introduce you to some people. Crafts. Yeah, like can introduce you to actors or whatnot. But I cannot find the money.
Yeah.
How do they find the money? Like how do they do it before Cassadaga comes out? Like how are they ready to go on another one before the first one's even shown whether it could make money or not?
You gotta. Is Florida like an untact market in that regard?
They're
a lot of dentists.
I mean,
Boca Raton dentist.
To attest to Scott's what is the word? Ambition. He would cultivate relationships. One of them for 5 years before approaching that button. Like, hey, I'm an aspiring producer. I want to make a movie, and there's a lot of untapped markets, and you have to get it's doctors, it's dentists, it's people with, money that sound like, movies sounds fun. Bring more movies down here. And there's a lot of people in Florida because Florida was supposed to become the next Hollywood. There was this huge push for it, 6 years ago. And a lot of production companies opened up in Florida and a lot of people moved to Florida. And then suddenly nothing happened. And they were like, what happened to Hollywood? Number two. So there's a lot of talented people down there that are, hungry to work as well. But that's it. They just it's about making those relationships and say, hey, can you deposit $300,000 in my bank account? And then get someone else. But if neither of them made money,
so maybe it's easier getting the money before the first one, just in case, right? Because if the first one didn't make money, no one knows that yet, and you're already getting a chance to do a second, right?
Honestly, I don't know how they wrangled that $1 million to do another film.
Right.
And
what was the second film? What is the second
Missionary?
film?
Missionary.
Okay.
Which going into that, I was like, I want to do something more dramatic. So it's more of a Fatal Attraction
thriller. Yeah, Shock to Drop, and it's the Orchard. They're putting it out. Do they have a date yet, or is it just the spring?
It's the spring. I think it's going to be April.
Right. I think they've put out their first 2 movies so far. Shock on VOD and DVD, and this is among one of the first 4 that they announced.
It will, and they're doing it was going to be the first one, but there were delays and stuff, but they're doing a bigger release for it.
And what was that experience like compared to Cassadaga? Did it feel like you guys were a well-rehearsed crew?
Completely.
Cool.
And it was something that we had really culminated together, and I was, there to say, well, what kind of movie do we want to make?
Less director for hire, more collaborator.
Yeah. And they were like, well, here's a few ideas we have. And I was like, this one kind of makes sense to me. And the Mormon angle I thought was very interesting. And Bruce was Mormon. So it was like getting a very genuine experience about a Mormon missionary.
Is there a big Mormon population in Florida?
There is. Okay. And then I'm looking forward to Utah seeing the movie.
Yeah.
You haven't seen it yet, right?
I haven't seen Missionary now.
How would you have seen it? Did it play? No.
It premiered at Fantasia.
Okay.
And then it also played Fright Fest.
Oh, okay.
It did really well at Fright Fest.
Sometimes I get to see his movies early.
Well, yeah, I believe he does.
I'm surprised he hasn't seen it yet. Natalie Victoria has seen it, who has been sitting here quietly breathing on us this whole time.
Is she one of the stars of Deadheads?
She is. She is the star of Deadheads.
And she's been hanging
She's shaking her head no.
She is the beautiful star of Deadheads.
You can chime in if you want. It's okay.
You gotta say hello.
Hi.
And
we know she can do more than that.
She is in my most recent film, Paymon. It's Paymon.
Paymon.
I'm thinking. We're probably gonna change the title because I'm not a big fan of the title.
Wait. Right. So there's another one in Florida or another one here?
Another one we shot in Florida.
Wow. So
they will not let me leave. He's not kidding when I was gone for.
But that's the thing. It's
no, who would blame you?
But you're happy because it's like, well, you just made 4 movies in a row, so that's kind of awesome.
Who goes to Florida to make movies?
So what was the third one about, or what you can say?
Missionary. After Missionary, and then Paymon is kind of a throwback, very isolated, demonic ghost story. I feel like it takes place in the last night at a transitioning police station. It's like a one cop at a transitioning police station. And she doesn't know that the real reason the cops had to move is because the year prior, the Paymon family, who is, very much based on the Mansons, but more so the family, not so much Charles Manson, had committed suicide. So it's kind of like, what if on that night they all got arrested, they committed suicide in the holding cell, and they've been haunting that place ever since. It's kind of got this assault on Precinct 13 feel in it. We made a movie that we were like, I wanted to make. I'm going to say that Paymon is my first horror film because I wanted to make a true horror movie that was something that would play at midnight and make an audience scared from beginning to end. Very simple, character-driven story.
Is it done or is it in post?
I'm in post. I'm color correcting it this week. Cool. I'm in post. We'll be done around March 1st.
And this is
and Natalie's in it.
What's your character? It's like you've never done that. I've actually been on a show with you on camera, and you're braver than this. I don't know what this is.
I know. I wasn't prepared to talk tonight. I play a
Zoinks. Yeah, where's our flushing water noise? Let's flush her.
No, I play a prostitute that
who's in jail.
Not well. She was in jail at one point, but yeah. So she kind of reveals important information for one of the cops there, and so yeah.
She was there the night they committed suicide. She
Yeah.
was in the next
scoop.
cell. Yeah.
All right, I see.
She's a shady character. It's
very mysterious.
Haunting on assault.
And this one you got to co-write as well, correct?
Scott and I wrote it together. Yeah.
Right, because Cassadaga and Missionary were scripts that you directed. So,
which was a strange process for me too, because I started as a writer.
Yeah,
and,
primarily.
And which is why I say that I'm like, the way when I make a movie, I'm of the opinion that when it's done, and it's also how I make a movie sometimes, is that like I'm militant, I'm a dictator, but I'm also of the opinion, well, my opinion doesn't matter, because it's subjective, just like everyone else's. So especially when I finish a movie, I don't mind saying, yeah, I don't really like it. I don't like watching it. It's not my thing. I'm proud of the effort. I think the actors are great in it. I think everyone putting the movie together is great. I mean, you like it.
Let's go back to
Cassadaga. We actually got I think we even have a fan question from John Smith about Cassadaga.
Yeah.
So it's a movie to be proud of, but I don't like it.
What don't you like about it?
I just don't like that. It's not me. It's not me. Where Dread was very me, and Missionary is very me. Dread and they're close to me.
Right.
They feel like something that if you watch Dread and watch Missionary, you'll be like, oh, okay, I get it.
Right.
And watch Paymon. Cassadaga isn't. And it was the first like director for hire job I did, even though it was just, my second film. But it was like, so going into that first experience with like, well, I didn't write this.
It must be a great experience, though, to have had that experience so you can compare. So you know what the difference of fighting for your vision is versus, hey, I'm going to make this as a technician and a art.
Well, then let me sell your movie.
Sell it, man. Which just came out.
Well, I know Jerry. Jerry had that's why I don't want to leave them to the end. They could be part of, if we're talking about Cassadaga. I feel like
we shouldn't save them till we go into our 2014 pass.
Yes, you're going to be a part of that too, our anticipated of the year. But yeah, as I bring those up, no, I mean, I like it a lot. It's longer than most movies that I like. That's the one critique I'll give you. And I didn't know that there was a post-credit scene until I got to DVD. Was that in the screening? That
it was.
I don't know why.
What's the post-credit scene?
Bailed, man.
No, I didn't. Get out of here. I was there to the bitter end. No, there's a sequence at the very. I mean, I don't want to give it away because people haven't seen it yet.
Okay,
but
you can whisper off.
I'll tell you afterwards.
I don't know if I sort of.
But no, I liked it for a number of reasons. First being a level. I'm bringing up your questions.
All right.
A level of maturity in terms of the directing, because, and I remember distinctly because within the first 5 minutes, you have a lead character that's deaf, and I could tell like. It felt to me like it was like your third or fourth movie as opposed to your second, because you have this character that's deaf, and I just love the way that you set up this really terrible thing that happens with her little sister. Yeah. It's like she's talking to the little kids, turns around, and then there's this one moment where she turns around, they're all missing, but like obviously she didn't hear them get up and all that. Yeah. And then they're all by the window, and it's just like the way that all set out and played out.
Yeah,
I knew it was something terrible that we were about to see. And it just, that's the point. It's like, within the first 5 minutes, I just saw what I consider.
I know why he likes it. I was thinking about it afterwards. Because it reminds me, a lot of Dexter. As a show, aesthetically, serial killer.
Okay.
And even the way it looks, partly because of where it's shot.
Totally.
Like if you had just halfway through Dexter walked in and goes, I'm going to catch that guy, I would have gone, of course. And you know what I mean? And he's the Dexter guy.
True.
So
I'll admit that.
I think we pigeonholed him.
But I also like that because I like hauntings, like haunted house movies and stuff like that. But I don't like, it has to be done really well for me to love it. And the thing is, you do a good one, but then you throw in a really weird fucking serial killer, and like the serial killer thing just sells it for me because I love the Geppetto. It's just a really twisted.
Yeah, and I love those elements. I love every element. I think this was. I think this movie was like my. I'm not comparing it to Jackie Brown, but I remember when Jackie Brown first came out, it was like 2.5. Now it's my favorite Tarantino
it's my favorite film too.
But at the time, I was like, you know, I was like, I think I love that. 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 But as a whole, I didn't love it. But now I love it.
And he doesn't love it, which is interesting, right?
And Natalie's never seen it. I'm like,
me or Tarantino?
The Tarantino doesn't love that one because it wasn't his original material. But it's his most heartfelt film.
Plus, the very opening of Cassadaga, I was reminded with the whole little origin with the little kid and what he does to his privates. It's very Pieces. I don't know if you intended that.
That is very Pieces.
Pieces is one of my favorite horror movies of all time. And when I revisited it on DVD, I was like, oh my God, how can I not love a movie that starts like Pieces?
Okay, well, let me tell you why I really actually liked the Cassadaga script when they sent it to me. Because it made the lead character deaf, yet it didn't play into the story at all.
Yeah.
They introduce a great romantic love interest who's in half the movie and then completely disappears.
I like that. Ryan gave me crap on our show that he's like, whoa, what was the point? I was like, I dig that. He's like,
that's why
I got a kid. I can't do this. I'm out.
That is why I did it. Because
that's what would really happen.
It played all these different elements in a girl's life that do not pay off to save the day. Because I was like, well, that's how life is. And I like stuff like that. I was like, but most audiences, they just want, they want it. They want the payoff.
It's like we're used to something, so you.
And I was like, that's awesome. She's deaf, yet she doesn't save the day because she can't hear anything. And it didn't have that like, thank God I'm deaf. I saved the day.
Yeah, that played into the plot.
Yeah.
Or like the male lead comes back and saves the day.
And I wasn't expecting her to save the day with her deafness, but I was expecting the killer's going to be right behind her, but she never heard him come in and, yell because she's deaf moment. Because if in any other movie she had been deaf, that would have been in there.
Because it had two different strands of serial killer, I think I wanted to see I think when Cassadaga, the town stuff was revealed, it made me go, I want this to be a TV show called Cassadaga, where there's supernatural things happening every week. You had that kind of
psychics.
vibe.
The town was much more fascinating for
me,
and that was my favorite part.
And I think that's what it is, a conglomeration of a lot of things that, in one film.
Yeah.
And it plays in it's a strange film. It is. I like that it's strange.
I dig it because it's strange. Yeah. That's the main reason.
Why does Jerry Smith dig it?
Okay. So we might as well go into questions. So Jerry
especially
Smith,
if it's a Cassadaga one, then we'll
it's a Cassadaga one. Is Jerry Smith, formerly of Icons of Fright and one of our good friends and listeners.
This is all an inside job, right?
When making Cassadaga, which was great, by the way, were there any particular influences, either visually or tonally, that inspired the overall feeling of the movie? What were you kind of drawing from?
So my two main inspirations, and I'd say my top one was The Changeling. It was like this kind of gothic, old-fashioned ghost story, and then like Giallo and Argento, and kind of stylistically a lot of the coloring and camera choices. But definitely Changeling was like, and it's again one of the main reasons why I wanted to do Cassadaga. And it's funny. You get in my head as a filmmaker. I said, I don't want to do anything original here. I want to do something classic. I wanted to make a movie like The Changeling, which, The Changeling, if you've never seen The Changeling, it's the Ring essentially ripped off the plot of The Changeling.
Yeah.
But The Changeling is brilliant. And it's,
you also have the challenge, though, of doing something in daylight for the most part, which is tough. Like Changeling is a dark and it's night. Gothic. Gothic's hard to do by day.
Yeah, 90% of this film was during the day.
It wasn't a lot of day stuff.
That's why it reminded me of Dexter.
Yeah.
Because Dexter's always in the day,
walking around.
Not a bad thing.
I think it's just a Florida thing.
It is a Florida thing.
So Changeling was like the main...
Changeling was the main inspiration. And having like a lot of story element with the lead character, like life element, and not just...
I liked her too, and I like that, she, not to take anything away from Kellen, but she's a beautiful girl, but she's not like you'd expect it to be like this super hot, like WB style. And I like that she was
she's quirky normal.
And I was able to invest in her more because of that.
I knew I recognized her when I was watching. I remember Newsroom. She's like, she is that character in the Newsroom. Yeah. She's the friend who the guy is with because he can't get her other friend, and kind of makes her feel bad about herself in a sense. But so that was interesting. Yeah, she was good.
I even gave Children of the Corn Genesis a chance because she's the lead of that as well.
What?
Yeah.
I haven't
seen it. Well, it's that and Brian Collins' review of it on Horror Movie Day saying that they reuse footage from Bad Boys 2. And I was like, I got to see this.
Are you serious?
And did they really? They totally do. Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, they use stock footage from the highway chase or whatever. We got a few questions. Might as well go through these now while we can. Yeah. Let's see. I hope I said this right. Dan Dominguez Sorry, Dan, if I butchered your name. He wanted to know, and I guess this is for all of us, but he says, having recently seen Nightbreed, the Cabal cut at Lincoln Center Scary Movie Series in November, I'm curious if you guys and Anthony have seen it and what your thoughts were. He goes on to say that he respects the effort, but at the end thinks it's a little exhausting, so to speak,
yes.
which has been the main critique I've heard of the Cabal cut, because they just put everything back in. Yeah. So I hear it's long.
It's very long.
So have you seen it?
And it's unpolished, and it's not the right voices, and it's not the right medium. So that's hard for people.
Yeah,
we went with
color
Clive.
correction. Yeah, Clive was there when we saw it. Fangoria hosted a screening of it at the New Bev 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And Clive actually came and he talked beforehand, and it was great. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the version that we saw, and I know that Scream Factory is kind of working on cleaning some of this up before they do the release a bit, but it's, it was very rough. And I mean, you could tell that they had just kind of thrown everything back in, just everything that they could find.
Every source.
And how great was
So sometimes we were looking at VHS tapes, and sometimes it was so grainy, you couldn't even really tell what you were looking at. And it became very apparent that the character, I don't even remember her name, the smoke woman.
Yeah, that's my favorite part.
She had been dubbed. And so.
Like, come in, man. Like, tell it. Like, I've got topless. And my baby's outside cooking. And you're like, holy fuck. Because she's got this exotic, hello, my name.
She's got this very gypsy voice.
It really blew my mind.
The final movie. And then it would cut to this scene, like this grainy VHS, where she's like, yeah, we're just like hanging out.
It was really crazy. It was like a surfer girl. And you're like, what? That's the exotic girl from...
It blew
so that blew my
mind.
mind.
And because they really did just go through and kind of throw every bit of footage that they could find back in, there were some scenes that were a little bit daunting, but I loved it because it made it more of... it became almost a love story more, and it was a story about the monsters, not about the cops who were hunting them. So it really did do that transition. So it did its job because it completely changed the face of the movie. It just needed some.
I just wonder though
polishing.
if it's about if you loved Nightbreed before, like if you liked, if you liked Nightbreed or you thought it wasn't what it was meant to be, I imagine that this will be great. But for someone who like loved it, like
as a kid,
one of my favorite movies when I was young,
Yeah.
unaware of anything missing, that it was ever tampered with. It felt like a complete film to me when I was young. I didn't enjoy the process of watching Cabal Cut only because I already liked the movie. So it wasn't anything wrong with the Cabal Cut.
Yeah.
And as an artist, I would totally get why Clive would want it to be like that, the way he wants it.
Yeah.
But they were talking on stage going, well, the other version's much more about what you were just saying about the cops and the monsters.
Cops,
and I'm like, I never felt that.
Evil.
I was always empathetic with the monsters as a kid. I never thought the cops could possibly.
No, yeah.
And so for me, I think it's just more about like, did you love a film? And you don't have to fuck with saying you love. It's, so.
Well, that was kudos to Mark Miller, who is working with Clive now on lots of like the comic book stuff and a lot of new stuff he's doing.
Yeah, Mark's great.
He like pulled that together.
Yeah.
Because Clive had been trying to get this stuff together for years, and it was not ever something like, Joe and I, but mainly because we didn't have the time to pursue like this thing. And he did that all on his own outside of, getting paid for it, or, it had nothing to do with that at all. And he wasn't, to get it. I know there's still film missing, and I have not seen this like most recent thing that they've been touring around. I've seen other things that I think this was more compiled and finished.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but I think it's good that, kudos to him for putting that together and like getting it out there. So I think, because that was always like number one question at signings and events, like, what about the Nightbreed Cabal cut? And now they're releasing it on Blu-ray, so it's going to look
amazing.
A lot better. They say it's going to. I'm
or as
curious,
best as they can make it.
As best as they can make it.
They're going to clean it up.
But yeah, it's cool. It's as a collector kind of thing. It's always cool and to see something restored. But it's weird, if you love something, it's funny how that impression you can't be shifted. It's just like I still love it. He's got a gun. My all-time favorite Cronenberg line.
That's going to be one of our sound bites.
Cronenberg was really great. I'd love to hear Clive talking about directing Cronenberg as an actor. I'm just curious because that's the only really big role. He's had lots of little roles and things, but that was a real character.
Yeah.
And I think in the Cabal cut, it seemed like he had even more.
He
There's
did.
scenes
he
that
had
of him.
more because there was definitely, again, because they were playing up the sympathy of the monsters.
Right.
There was much more of showing Cronenberg's hatred of them and how it was kind of an unrational hatred. He didn't have a meaning. He was just like, you're weird and unusual and I must kill all of you because of that.
Yeah.
And so it really did make the monsters more empathetic because you're like, well, they at least have, some type of an emotional pull. This guy has none. He's just evil.
Yeah.
So
I do have to loop in the jump cut story quickly. It'll take 2 seconds.
Okay. I've got a story too.
Because we had Clive Barker. We knew we were going to be talking about Clive Barker with you, but I think 3 days ago, a girl wanted to have her, like an 18-year-old girl wanted to have her birthday party at Jump Cut, and her stepdad, I guess, comes in and he's going to write me a deposit to hold the place. And then at the end, he said, oh, maybe we could have a Blu-ray release party here for Hill Street Blues when it comes out. Yeah, I was in all the episodes. I was like, oh, cool. I didn't recognize him, but I felt like I kind of did. And he said, yeah, I was in Altered States. And they kind of posed and I went, oh, cool. Altered States is a great movie. And then he said, all right. And he left. I went home, looked him up. Fucking, he's the captain. He's the sheriff in Nightbreed. He's the baddest of the bad. You're like, and I was so upset because I could have talked to him about it.
You texted me immediately.
I know. I was like, holy shit, the sheriff from Nightbreed just came in here. Like guy who like leads the charge to destroy them all, which was pretty cool. So
I got a phone call.
I put it on Twitter. So it was serious.
Now you can like embroil yourself with it.
Exactly.
Say, Hill Street Blues, come down.
Exactly. Hill Street.
Anytime.
But I mean, those characters I felt like cops were portrayed fairly cartoonish, so there's no way you could sympathize with them.
We had developed a series for a while of Nightbreed.
Oh wow!
Trying to get that up, which would have been nice. Nightbreed, he wanted Nightbreed to be his Star Wars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and it just kind of
Well, it's too ahead of its time.
I have a very kind of old book from the early '90s that I actually got used, and it's got conceptual drawings from the Nightbreed series in it that I've never seen anyplace
There's a video
else.
game in New Zealand. There was an IBM game.
There was?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it blew my mind when I was a kid. Nightbreed had just come out, and they're on the back of this, like, it could have even been the Amiga, and I was looking at it, and I didn't get to buy it for some reason. It was kind of a pick-a-path kind of game where you'd get to go, but it had all the graphics.
Ooh.
So that made me think, though, back then, like, looking back on that, clearly they thought it was going to be, it probably was made before it had come out, and they thought this is going to hit big. Yeah. But the funny thing is, you look at all the shit now, it's all a riff off that True Blood. All these things are worlds of monsters. That totally could have worked. Midian could have totally been a world of a show. It still could.
Yeah.
The Cabal.
Ahead of its time. But now, I mean, the timing now is probably the best it could be, especially for TV. Okay, just a couple of more quick questions, and then we'll get to this. Dustin Sane, who's one of our listeners, he got a couple of them in here. So first and foremost, I guess this is for all of us, and there's already an answer to this, so I think we could just comment on it. But he's saying, ignoring the direct-to-DVD Hellraiser without Doug Bradley, who do you guys think would do justice to the reboot of Hellraiser?
Natalie Victoria.
Last I heard,
no.
Final answer. You could at least be a Cenobite.
Last I heard, Clive was writing it now. Apparently, right?
What answer did you get? You said it was already answered.
I'm saying that the answer is, who would do justice to it? Well, obviously the guy that created it.
I thought he was talking about the actor.
Oh yeah, I think he was talking about
aside
from Doug Bradley, who else would do
I don't think they should do Pinhead unless it's. I think you change to a different Cenobite. It's a whole world of Cenobites.
Yeah.
Well, you know what's funny is, from what I understand as of right now, and again, I'll believe it when it happens because this is, who is it, Dimension and the Weinsteins. Mm-hmm. The last we heard was that Clive himself was rewriting the remake, and that Doug would reprise Pinhead in it
for someone else to direct.
For someone else to direct.
Because I don't think that Weinstein would let you make another Hellraiser film without having Pinhead in it. I mean, that's what people expect.
Probably,
it's like doing Nightmare on Elm Street without Freddy.
But they did Evil Dead.
I can go on the record and say something right now and blow your mind.
On record?
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, because we were, up until recently, we were, like producers on it, but we had nothing to do with it. Because, it went through that string of like, every French filmper was attached to
Martyrs and Inside and all this stuff. Yeah.
And, but they didn't want the Cenobites in it at all.
That's what I hear. But what's Hellraiser without the I don't know.
Yeah, that's harder to understand.
Yeah.
I can argue that it's still a very good movie without the Cenobites.
But what is it? Is it a box that opens a gateway to hell?
No, it's about a soul that escapes from hell and finds his ex-lover, and she kills.
That's a great film.
So, I can see that approach to it without bringing...
Given that there are so many incarnations, and that's the problem. I would also love, I know Clive's probably public about talking about the string of incarnations. I didn't watch the last few, but that's because, I genuinely think the first one's in my top couple. I think it's one of the most creative films.
I've gone on record saying that some of the last ones that they did, like Deader, are good films. They are.
Elric
Conceptually, I
is
love
not
No
in
comment
disbelief.
because I haven't seen them. I can't comment, but I think you're probably insane.
I'm telling you, conceptually.
I mean,
I'm not saying they're the
is
greatest.
that the internet
made.
one where he goes onto the internet?
No, this
Deader?
is the one
That's
Because
about
demons live in pornography.
Whole
No,
world. Yes, it's right.
Deader was about kids who learn how to. It's kind of a Flatliners-esque plot where they learn to die and bring themselves back.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so some of the Cenobites start following back or realize there's another one that took place in Bulgaria, I think it was.
They were all shot in
Bulgaria.
Romania and
Yeah.
Bulgaria.
But there were some of them, like of the latter ones. Now, the internet one I couldn't get into, but there were some of them that
I agreed
was like,
with you
it's
about the
not
graphic
a bad
novels
concept. Now,
being
that's
much stronger.
That's my question.
Yeah.
Is I was always a huge fan of the graphic novels just because they went so many places and focused on the Cenobites and the clown whose job is to perform to unbaptized babies in hell and things like that. And I was always such a huge fan of those. Was there ever any thought of bringing some of those out?
You like as films?
As films or anything?
Not, at least not in my time. No, I mean that had never been.
I think he said on that documentary, he was saying like, these are the MPA couldn't stomach these.
Yeah.
But that's why we do the comic. We can go all
All
the
out
way,
And, I mean, they
which is
are
fun.
extreme, but I always wanted them as a TV show because it's set up inside of the Hellraiser mythos, but each one goes a different way and they've got different Cenobites that you've never even seen before. And some of them are about the creation of the Cenobites and some of them are prequels and future ones. And they go all over the place. And I loved that element of them.
A friend of mine pitched, he told me about pitching and how they just went, they really wanted.
Everyone we know. Pitched.
Yeah. That's a friend who wasn't part of our story. And he said that they were really hung up about the bondage thing. Like the studios couldn't get over it. Oh yeah, they have to look like that. And he was like, really? Even though that's so particular to Clive, B, particular to that time period, couldn't you reinvent how it looked? And I remember, and I said to him at the time, I was like, you know what? Remember that line, the key line. I think I might have mentioned this on the show. Angels to some, demons to other.
Yeah.
Why not go for angels and see what an angel? So you could have had certain kind of Cenobite that appeared totally different and maybe as a positive force for someone, and then play with that idea.
Yeah.
I was surprised they never, if all those sequels.
They must look like they dressed at Hot Topic. Else we're not making the film.
Yeah, I mean it's
Well, what's funny is because again, literally everyone we know went in and pitched.
Yes,
Hellraiser.
everyone.
And I had a really good conversation with Sean Keller because I think him and his writing partner went
did
in.
they pitch?
I'm sure they did. And the idea we had, because we were like, well, who would be Pinhead? Because you can't not have Doug Bradley, and it's weird if somebody else there. And then I think Sean came up with it, and we just riffed on it. It's like, well, if you're going to do a remake, why not make Pinhead a female? And not only that, but like a super hot female that has pins in her heads, because then there's that weird sort of like, I kind of want to fuck her, but she's going to tear my soul apart sort of thing. And then like it opens up a really interesting, weird, perverse kind of version of what Hellraiser
Russ
could
Myers.
be.
Yeah, there was
Hellraiser.
always the couple female the couple of female Cenobites that there were always got a lot of attention.
I like the open throat.
Well, they were
honestly.
Yeah.
We did a
Yeah.
huge article with her recently where we went
really?
back and interviewed her and everything. And the same one, I can't even remember what her name was, Roxy in the third that got turned into one at the end, always got a lot of press attention just because they were female Cenobites dressed up like they came from Hot Topic in that kind of bondage-y style.
And for the record, they did do this just so our fans don't jump down our throat. I didn't read it, but recently, I believe Clive co-wrote some comic books.
It's still ongoing.
It's ongoing
with
now,
Boom.
and the story is Kirsty as
Kirsty
the
is,
new.
Oh, that is
I did
That I like.
I did an issue when because Chris Monfett had done it, and then I did one, and then they got
Oh, cool! I didn't know that. Cool.
but yeah, Kirsty is Pinhead now.
Yeah, she takes over as Pinhead. That's
What
awesome.
was the mind blowing thing you said you were going to say? Was that there could be no,
They didn't want they didn't want Cenobites.
but there's no
Which is
front runner
shocking.
right now that we know of.
I have news, but I'm not. I
It's
can't.
We don't get that.
I can't talk about this one because it's not. Really
It's not
my
out there
place
yet.
to talk about.
Remind me to, this is going to sound weird, before you leave, I have to show you my leg. I'm covered in
show you my
Hellraiser
legs.
tattoos. So.
And you know what? I just want to tell one Clive-related story. If anybody else wants to throw anything else out there, but one of the things he did that I will always love and respect him for. I was at a Fango Weekend of Horror show, waiting in line to get his autograph, as dozens of other fans were, and he waited for everybody as usual. But there is a filmmaker friend of mine named Scott Perry who is several
I know Scott.
people up in line. And he gets up to Clive, and I assume he dropped something to get autographed. I can't remember. But, you know, Clive's signing his thing, and he's always very good at talking to people while he's doing all this. And he's signing his thing, and he's like, "Hey, Clive, you know, I
like he's signing his thing."
Well, not literally, you know, his whatever.
Because I've seen that.
Yes, I've seen him draw giant penises on people's, you know, guitar cases, and I'm like, well, that guitar case is ruined. But,
no, it's not. Clive Barker drew it. It's not like you drew it.
But anyway, so Scott's talking to him, and he's getting something signed, and very nervously is like, you know, Clive, I'm such a big fan. And you know, I made this short film. I have the DVD here, and I'd be really honored if you just check it out at some point. You know, I just because of who you are. And Clive like stops signing, and he looks at the DVD, and he's like looking down, and he's like, "You made this? This is your film?" And he's like, "Yep." And he slowly pulls the sleeve out and pushes it towards him, and he's like, "Please make it out to Clive."
Yeah, that's right.
And he had Scott sign his DVD of his film to Clive Barker, cool. And I was like, "That's fucking cool."
Yeah,
that's a cool
What'd
guy
you have
right there.
To give Clive, Rob?
What's that?
What did you have to give him?
You know what? I could have done better. I had I didn't give anything to Clive. I got my Hellraiser. You remember that annoying tin that Anchor Bay put out? They put out a ton of tins that don't fit on any fucking bookshelf. I took the booklet out of that because it came with a nice little booklet, and I already had Ashley Lawrence sign the middle. And so it's a picture of him and Ashley, and I had him sign the other side.
You're just a taker, not a
I'm
giver.
A taker.
You're just
I had nothing to give. I know he's not going to watch it, so I'm not going to give him anything.
No, mine, because I have on my, as I mentioned, on my right leg, I've got various incarnations of lament configurations tattooed, just because Hellraiser, the series, was always one of the biggest, kind of the one that resonated with me the most, because I loved it so much when I was younger, and it stuck with me, and I kind of evolved with it, where I then discovered the comics and the books and all of the mythos, and I just kind of kept expanding with it. And we'd done some work with Gary Tunnicliffe, who created the original lament configurations. And he had given me the original drawings that you guys used for the open lament configurations. Yeah. And that's what I used to have tattooed on the back of my calf. And so when I eventually ran into Clive when we were doing the Cabal Cut thing, and I was running around in shorts, not even thinking that he was going to be there, he stopped me and he was like, "Man, you even got like the fangs and the teeth on the demons." Because when the box opens, it actually forms these little creatures that are biting their own tails. And he was like standing there staring at my calf, remarking on how accurate I'd been. Yeah. And I didn't want to say like, "Yeah, Gary Tunnicliffe gave me the design," because I didn't want to get Gary.
He's like, "How did you do that?"
Yeah, it was pretty remarkable. So,
all right.
So 2014, guys.
Yes, I made.
You got
a
all
list.
the fan questions?
That's pretty much it. Yeah. You
right.
can look at the list if you like. I made a list. I'm just going to shoot through these, and if you guys want to stop to talk about anything specific, that's fine. But we did our big year-end wrap-up episode, and now we're in 2014, so I figured we'd shoot out a bunch of titles, let people know what's coming out and what we're excited for.
Yeah, I mean, if there's some element to it that sets it apart, why we would want to watch it, sure.
Yes.
Like the first one.
Going in order, January 17th is Devil's Due.
I'd like to talk about that one. Can we stop?
I guess.
Okay.
Make it too far,
I saw the trailer for this, and I'm like, don't want to see this. And then I read Fango and read Radio Science made that. I'm like, fuck, yes, I want to see this. I want to see this so hard. It's not even just because I want to see, even with material that might be just whatever. I just want to see what 5 guys who could make that short.
It's 2 of them. It's 2 of them.
Oh, it's only 2.
But it's still technically.
Now I want to see it.
Exactly. The effects, the practicals, knowing, because I read a big thing about and I think it was in Fango, about their practical effects, how they push it, absolutely as much as you can practically, and then all they want to do with the CGI is hide the strings. And I love that, because that's why CGI's purpose should be to hide the effect. Yeah.
I'm a sucker for a good old Satan movie.
Yeah, and pregnancy movies are fun, right? Like they're crazy.
Movies. So, and I mean, we haven't had too many good Satan movies lately. We've kind of shifted to torture and ghosts. So I'm excited to see some satanic.
Yeah, I'm definitely curious.
Come back.
They these are the guys that did the last segment in VHS, Radio Silence. They've already won, because one of the greatest viral marketing things came out of this.
There's a baby.
The devil baby prank
in New York.
Was done to promote this. So even if the movie blows, at least we got that devil baby prank, which is freaking hysterical.
My aunt, who knows nothing about horror except that I kind of like it, sent it to me. She put it up on my Facebook page today, and she was like, "Did you see this Rebekah. So I mean, and it reached her in like Ohio.
They went all out. They got an animatronic baby. The thing looks.
Do they live here?
It looks really disturbing.
Are they LA based? I would love to meet these people because I'm just curious. I don't know anything about them. I'd never heard of them before
Not
VHS.
Until VHS. It'd be interesting.
I just know they're a mixture of different skills. I know one's like a practical effects guy, one's more of a director, one's more. They are very different skill sets.
Yeah. So that
who's
comes
releasing
out.
Devil's
Fox.
It's
Which kind of scares me because then it's going to be, we have to keep it PG-13. And but I don't know. Maybe they'll go kind of balls out.
Is it PG-13?
I think this one is R.
Oh, it's R. I think it's R.
It doesn't look like it could be with pregnancy and demons. R.
Yeah. They were also doing a marketing campaign where they would, they said that they would send you something if you changed on Facebook, if you changed your religion status to Satanism.
Really?
Yeah.
And
I was like, I think mine already is. So just as a joke.
Give them an A+ for the effort. Yeah. So actually, that January 17th is today when this airs. So that's out today.
Well, I always wonder, is it today? Is it out?
It is.
No. The day with
we come out on Friday.
It was good. I liked it.
Also, January.
Did you guys see it?
I will by the time you listen to me. It's going to be weird.
I'm skeptical of the viral marketing campaign. I'm curious as how far it will really go.
Yeah,
because things like Paranormal Activity had a huge marketing budget behind it with the illusion of a grassroots.
Yeah.
And so did Blair Witch.
Yeah, so did Blair Witch.
Because Blair Witch had the internet site that they
$5 million P&A budget.
Yeah.
So
it shows that they would rather put the money into marketing than the movie, which is a bummer. Because it'd be nice to see movies with budgets rather than $20,000 budget.
Yeah. Also today is Big Bad Wolves, which Magnet Releasing is putting out on I think on VOD and limited theatrical. It's just it's an Israeli movie festival one. I don't even know if it's really horror, but from what I heard
Revenge.
of it, have you seen? Yeah, it's like a revenge.
A lot of people saw it on the festival circuit, and a lot of people loved it.
Loved it, yeah. I didn't. It played a few festivals where I could have seen it, and I didn't. But people loved it.
I think it's a child molester revenge kind of. Let's get revenge on the guy who did this.
But here's the funny. The thing is, everyone's saying it's funny. It's darkly funny. Yeah. And when somebody described it to me, I was like, I don't understand how a pedophile child killer could be a hilarious.
It's because they're Israeli child molesters. It's just crazy funny.
It's the accent. It's funny.
But I did. If you look up the trailer on YouTube, it's got a weird dark tone. And I mean, Quentin Tarantino already called it like the best film of last year. And I get that when I see the trailer, like, oh, of course, it's got that Reservoir Dogs kind of dark humor to it or whatever. January 21st is Knights of Badassdom, which...
brought to you by a co-podcaster, Joe Lynch. Also on the Geek Nation.
Who has kind of disowned the film.
Technically not. Yeah, it's not... Joe does not approve of this version that's coming out.
And therefore, none of the cast is doing any press on it or talking about it.
Yeah.
If you're the film producers in this situation, don't you just go, oh, no one in my cast wants it out, so couldn't I just let the guy have his director cut? Like, at what point do you think this is the right way to go when everyone is boycotting it?
Yeah.
Like, isn't there a point where you just go, maybe I should reconsider this movie?
And so much of the press, the horror press, has talked about the whole turmoil, and most of them seem to be siding with Joe.
Well, they will, because they'll know him.
Obviously, we all know Joe.
But, I don't know if... look, I don't think it's getting a giant release. I think it's a VOD and a limited theatrical. In fact, it's not even a limited theatrical. They're doing tug screenings where they want people to request it. And that's the thing is, I don't know if a big chunk of the crowd that was wowed by this at Comic-Con 2 years ago, or, a chunk of middle America know that it's not Joe's movie.
No one will.
That's the thing.
But I question, like, with a limited release, why the fight in the first place? You get to a point where we're like, well, what is the struggle about?
Yeah, I really
do we know what it was?
I want to see them two back to back because I want to see if it is like a cabal cut thing where it completely changes the face of the movie.
Well,
or if it is just like I want more boobs.
It sounds more like a Ty West thing. It sounds more like a Cabin Fever 2.
Like Cabin Fever 2. It sounds very similar to that. I think they just cut a lot of elements out of it. Because Joe's a personality, if you know him, and you can expect that personality in the movie. And he's joked on his podcast here that, before it was like Role Models with monsters, and now it's just a ripoff of Role Models. So I'm assuming that they trimmed a lot of the elements that would make the movie more a horror movie. But it's coming out if anyone wants to brave and see it and let us know what they think. You never know. After that, I put down Torture Chamber, which comes out on DVD January 28th. That's the new movie from Dante Tomaselli. I like Dante's stuff. It's really surreal and weird and nightmarish. It's not for everybody. He's kind of like the David Lynch / Argento of very low budget indie horror. And I'm just curious to see it. So if you like really weird, bizarre shit,
I don't like the title.
Torture Chamber. No.
It's an instant turn off for the torture kind of one. But you're right. He is pretty artistic.
It's more of a it's more he's kind of like he's got a super hardcore cult following of people that like his stuff.
I'd much rather see Paz de la Huerta
on.
completely naked with a syringe.
I can't. That was sold on a poster.
I can't wait for Nurse 3D. I think it
3D.
looks like genius.
February 7th.
Looks like a hot mess.
Yeah.
My husband
like
and I,
her.
we've been kind of saving
she
our
is a hot
date
mess.
night for this one because we want to see it in the theater in 3D.
In 3D.
And we get one date night. We always swap babysitting with Elric. So we'll watch his kid and,
So
he'll
you're
watch
not
ours.
going. You're not
I'm
going to
taking
Nurse
her
3D.
kid to Nurse 3D. I'm just like, I just put a popcorn on its head and stick her in the corner.
Marty, just sit over there. No, but we kept saying, we were like, okay, well, we got one more date night before Elric has a second kid, and we can't really stash a third one on him. So what are we saving it for? Nurse 3D.
Wow.
I legitimately think it looks like the perfect kind of what it wants to be.
It knows what it is.
It knows what it is.
Cult movie.
The marketing.
You wouldn't have
is-
cast her if you didn't.
No.
She is a larger than life character. She's really confident. She's weird, which I like about her a lot.
But she's terrible in the trailers for
But
Nurse
she's
3D.
awesome on Boardwalk Empire.
and Enter the
That's the
Void.
thing.
Enter the Void is like
she's good in
stunning.
other stuff, but in
No, I
this,
bet you
know.
in sound bites that could be part of it, though. It might be campy. The whole film might have that camp, and if the whole film commits to camp, that's the thing about camp. It's a commitment,
It's
and
a
when
commitment,
people play
yeah.
it for a laugh, it doesn't work. When you go all the way, it works. That's how John Waters and early,
At least that's how it feels.
It feels like
and the posters are
Well,
genius.
that's kind of I mean, at least this has become kind of an urban legend of AFM that Nurse 3D was taken to AFM with just a poster. And there was nothing else. There was no script. There was nothing. It was just her in that sexy little latex outfit, riding a syringe and Nurse 3D.
And then there's the other one of her completely naked, just covered in blood.
Yep,
which
so
is
that's
like,
the better one.
And apparently they
I saw that.
Definitely
I'm
the
like,
better one.
I wanna
tons
see
of
that.
money just off selling that poster at AFM. Something I discussed squirrels this year, how all they did was have a poster for squirrels, and just that poster of a squirrel holding a finger, they sold tons of markets, and therefore they're able to make this huge movie. And that's what happened
Brace
with
yourself.
Nurse.
Sex sells.
Sex sells.
Yes. This is my
She was
Mad
in
Men
that?
Don Draper moment. Sex
Wow.
sells.
She was in
people.
like a horrible accident while they were making that movie.
Oh, really? I don't know.
She
Really?
was hit by one of the stunt drivers, had like
Oh my god,
17 surgeries, like
shit.
really
Oh my
bad.
God.
I didn't know about that. That's crazy. I actually put one in here that's not on your list just because the trailer debuted today.
What the fuck? Off script.
Sorry.
Rob G.
Unidentified comes
That's
out
not
February
on.
11th.
That's not on my sheet.
I know I wrote it on mine. It's
Is it on the second
it's the
page?
directorial debut from Jason Miller, who works with Arioscope Pictures. He produced Hatchet 2 and Chillerama and a bunch of stuff with Adam Green. So this is his first movie. He's branched off and wrote.
Do we know what it is?
Thing. It's a what I understand. It's like a found footage alien movie. It's pretty much a group of friends that go to Vegas. So it's got kind of like that hangover scenario, but what if they come across what they think is a UFO or alien? So check out that trailer. That just debuted online. Elric's favorite movie to be Dead Snow 2, Red versus Dead. Now, I have a date of February 14th, but I think that's
Fuck off.
overseas.
I think
I hate
that's
this Dead
overseas. It got
Snow
backed
shit.
up
I
in
didn't
the
like
US.
Dead Snow
It's
either.
just silly.
Everyone
The
loved
characters
Yeah.
are stupid. They're all like they couldn't even get into Hostel 1. They were that stupid. They're like the characters in Hostel 1 like had an IQ of 3 and these had an IQ of 2, and I was just like, I just don't care.
Oh, man.
I know the zombies look cool and stuff, but by
Yeah.
that point, I no longer like what you're saying about Dread. I like people to approach genre seriously, even in comedy.
Yeah.
Like seriously, as in we know this is good. I don't. No one can. They didn't think that when they're making Dead Snow.
Well, I was surprised
know?
because I had seen it kind of late in the game, and again, it was like the talk of the town.
Yeah,
And
it
was
had
like
its little
every festival loved it, and I was like, and it won a lot of stuff.
Con.
And I was like, what am I missing?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. It's
It's
fun.
all, well,
I
it's
like
all
it.
right. Yeah.
You know,
If you want to live your life by all right,
Yeah.
I want excellence.
occasionally,
I want transcendence.
Look,
Move me.
Some days you want a steak, some days you want McDonald's.
Even
for
when I want
dinner,
McDonald's, I don't
right?
want Dead Snow McDonald's.
Okay, coming from IFC Midnight, Almost Human, February 21st.
A very fun movie.
We had you've seen it
very
already. We had
enjoyable
those guys
movie.
in the show a couple episodes back.
And
I'm
we have a
looking forward
great
to that.
article coming up in Fangoria,
Fangoria,
on it, written by Rob G.
My return to Fangoria in print.
The coolest thing about it is it'll make you want to make your, if you're a filmmaker, it'll inspire you to want to go out and make that movie with. It's kind of like it has. I think that's the comparison to Evil Dead. Not that it's like Evil Dead. It's that feel of you can go home, you can make this movie, and it can be fun, and it can bring back those feelings. It's not perfect. It's got certain scenes that are clearly first time film, but other things that are brilliant.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Check out the trailer online. They just released a new trailer, but. Actually, in that article, I quoted the director, Joe Bigas, saying, it's like, if this doesn't sell the movie, I don't know what will. But he's like, most alien abduction movies, it's like the guy gets abducted and comes back later and you figure out, what happened there. He's like, what if the alien abduction happened in the opening scene and then he got back and it turned into Maniac? Yeah. And I'm like, sold. I want to see that weird
It's
movie.
very Terminator-y. It has a very Terminator feel to the first Terminator.
So looking forward to that. Up next, Grand Piano, March 7th.
I'm pretty excited about this one. Now,
I've seen it.
Is this
really good.
a Woodhouse production? I know that
he won't act on his own, he said. But then he's in Cooties.
He's in Cooties.
Yeah, he had said he wouldn't do Spectre
Which is later in the list. But
You're a liar, Elijah.
Super cool film. It's very De Palma-esque. I think it's the filmmaker's. I want to say it's his first film, but I'm going to feel bad if it's not. But it feels like a straightforward De Palma style thriller. It's really good. Nice. March 21st is Cheap Thrills. Draft House Releasing is putting out.
Probably the most universally praised film I've heard in years.
I love Cheap Thrills.
I've not met someone who didn't like it.
I loved it.
Yeah,
loved
everyone seemed to love it.
I heard that it's not really a horror movie.
Yeah,
it's not at all.
Yeah, it'll appeal to people that like that
extreme genre stuff.
Extreme, yeah.
It's a simple genius idea. That like
executed well, right?
Executed well. I mean,
great actors too. Pat Healy's a really fun actor, and
it does exactly what it's meant to do, and it does it on its own level, and it's really enjoyable.
Next one, I don't know much about this, but April 25th is The Quiet Ones.
Yeah, the Hammer film
which
with
is
Jared
a new
Harris.
Hammer film. Yeah, there you go. It's a new Hammer film.
That's all I know.
Lionsgate as well. Next, in the spring of 2014, a little movie called Missionary.
Missionary? What is that, Jim?
Yeah. I wrote this fast. I just realized I spelled your name wrong on the...
Why you left like four letters out? Enough. That's pretty good.
Listen,
I feel like a pharaoh.
There's a list in front
kind
of you.
Like a fairy tale princess.
Call me Anafi.
Okay, so once we know when that's coming out, we'll mention it again.
Anthony DiBlasi's Lates from Shock Till You Drop. The Orchard.
Damn it. I suck at this. Willow Creek comes out in the spring of 2014. That is Bobcat Goldthwait's found footage Bigfoot movie.
One of our dream guests.
Yes, one of our dream guests. And
that voice
NPI picked it up. Here's another one I don't know much about. Scribbler. I read about it on Shock.
Awesome.
The Scribbler.
I saw a short version of it. It was like a cut version of it at Comic-Con. Sorry, not Comic-Con, AFM. And I liked it a lot.
I heard it was good. I hate the title, but I heard it was good.
Yeah,
it comes out May 1st. It's based on a comic book by Dan Schaefer. And it stars Katie Cassidy, who was in Black Xmas, Nightmare Remake, Garrett Dillahunt from The Last House remake. And
he's a good actor, that guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sasha Grey is very believable in certain roles.
Yep.
Being strangling a guy.
Yeah. Gina Gershon, Eliza Dushku. So it is a really great cast.
I'm Googling it right now.
Sasha Grey is Natalie's favorite actress.
Oh, really?
Is that true?
No.
Okay.
Didn't you see Would You Rather?
I like her early work, but that's about it. Up next, The Sacrament, Ty Weston movie with AJ Bowen and Joe Swanberg.
I'm going to put you on the spot right now.
Yes.
Because we didn't do our top 10s with movies. Where would that have placed in your top 10? Had it been part of that year?
So you saw it?
Yeah.
We both started at AFI, but we when we did our top 10, we decided it would be next year.
See, that's tough because
top 5?
It would be in the top 5. Yeah, top 5 for sure.
It would have been definitely.
I think it's Ty's best movie. I think it's the best that AJ's ever been.
I feel that it's not completely a horror film. It's a little more than that in the sense it's more like a drama.
Yeah,
it's like a retelling of Jonestown, but in a really interesting.
Yeah. So I mean, I loved it.
It's a very strong film. It's not a fun film.
No, definitely not fun.
Like some of like Innkeepers is fun.
We should do a double feature of Dread and The Sacrament.
Yeah.
And then we can hang ourselves.
No, I'm looking forward to The Sacrament. I love House of the Devil.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I like Ty's movies, and they keep getting. He doesn't repeat himself. That's what I like.
I can report back probably in a few days from the set of them being reunited. Did we talk about them being reunited? It's not a horror film.
No.
But a film noir friend of ours is shooting, and we got AJ.
It's called The Frontier.
The Frontier, AJ and
Jocelyn
back together in a film.
And
they actually have, their scenes are pretty much all together, which will be fun.
Oh,
Very
cool.
different roles.
Yeah.
So
it's going to play out differently.
As I said to him, now you get the babysitter. Oh, so you are the babysitter. It's time to continue. But yeah, it could be fun.
May 16th is the new Godzilla. I don't know. I'm excited.
June
June 20th, The Purge 2.
Will it be my idea?
It sounds like it is.
What?
Or at least they're...
I pitched my idea a few months ago on the show of what I thought it should be.
At least they snatched it.
That'd be awesome if they took it. I'd be happy about that. I wouldn't sue it.
What was it? Say it.
Well, from what I read that they're doing, also they're currently calling it, and Ryan Turek actually, got a comment on this today. Every press release keeps calling it the next chapter in The Purge, and everyone's like, that can't really be the title.
Yeah,
I think Brian Collins said it was called The Purge 2 Less Racist. Which I thought was a good title.
Yes,
because the first one had that racism dead on.
Dead on.
The next chapter of The Purge is just the working title at the moment. I mean, they should just call it The Purge 2. But no, apparently it's a big storyline that takes place outside of the house and in the middle of the Purge.
In the actual
people
Purge
that
event.
are stuck in the middle of all of it, trying to survive on the streets.
That's like...
Well, that wasn't my pitch was get outside the house. No, I like the idea that you could...
it is outside the house.
I like the idea that you would be forced to be part of the Purge to make everyone culpable, because otherwise you'll have a lot of people who go, I'm never going to kill. But if you made everyone, when they turn 18, take a life, then everyone's in it together. No one can narc on someone when they've all done the same thing. And you could have his son, who's come of age, he won't do it.
Yeah.
And
you just wrote The Purge 3.
Well, guess who's first in line when you say no to killing people? You're going to be all the first ones killed. So you'd have all these people who are peaceful, who are basically going to be hunted. Kind of like Punishment Park was a film in the 70s where it's this crazy British, it's like basically an art house film, but they just take these people to the desert and they say, go, you start running, and then they just chase them to kill them if they catch you. But it's totally shot like a documentary. So they wanted people to think this was like a real dystopic thing. It's crazy if you get a chance to see it. But I feel like you can just put, the idea is so good. I mean, it's easily the most disappointing film of last year because the idea is here and the execution's here.
Yeah.
It's not the technical execution, it's the low standards. Let's do a home invasion film.
I was so excited to see that.
Yeah, you could do so
And
much
then
better than that.
It becomes a home invasion film.
Yeah.
You're just let down.
I'd also like to see it set in an office building. It's the last day, and it's just
It's
on.
like Die Hard.
Yeah, everyone turning on each other and their lists of
It
who
has
they
the
want.
potential to transcend into
It
a pretty
does.
good sci-fi series.
Yeah,
It really does.
It could be.
Get
Yeah,
bigger.
the second one could make it a good franchise.
Did it do well?
Yeah, I mean,
It did.
tons.
Yeah. No, it definitely
really, really well.
Yeah, it did
Yeah,
much
that's
better than
why.
It
that.
was one of the best that year, especially for.
Oh yeah, I mean, it took the wind out of
company.
your next, unfortunately, because I think a lot of people
Because their marketing trailers looked similar on the masks.
and they beat them to the punch of that.
But speaking of Blumhouse, wait, is this one?
I don't
the
think
next
it's
one
the
is
next one's
not
not
through
Blumhouse.
Blumhouse this
No
time.
Purge 2, yeah.
Scott Derrickson is doing Deliver Us from Evil, which was originally called Beware the Night, which is what all the press has been under, Beware the Night. But I'm excited because it's a Satan movie, but this one focuses more on the investigation of it. So it's kind of from the perspective of the cop. And what's his name is in this one too.
Eric Bana.
Why did I think the guy from Sinister was in this again?
Oh no, Ethan Hawke is not.
Thank
It's
you.
Eric Bana is the lead and Olivia Munn. And
He
here's
couldn't
the
be in it
cool
because
thing.
he died in the Purge, so he can't
That's right.
act again.
But Ethan Hawke is
His
doing,
career's
he's
over
doing
now.
something similar to that.
Okay, I swear I read something about Ethan Hawke doing an investigation.
Now
film
I have
as
a question about this. So Deliver Us from Evil and Beware the Night.
It's the same movie. It's
No, I mean, this had to have been like a rights thing because they're both, I'd say, adequately appropriate titles of the same ilk. And B is actually a better one because it starts with a B. It gets it higher on the list.
Netflix list.
So I'm confused. Did you know why they changed
Could be the
title?
use of the word deliver to tap into the religious overtones.
yeah. Who knows? Yeah.
I think the second title's better.
Beware the Night.
Yeah.
Beware the
The
Night sounds
original
better.
title, yeah. And, the thing that's cool, this comes out July 2nd. It was originally slated for spring of 2015.
And they were so confident
yeah,
that they bumped it
the
forward.
studio was
Would you
so
think that's because of
stoked on it.
Conjuring?
Yeah, for sure.
Showing the model change?
They saw this and they're like, this could be this year's Conjuring. So
I will say this about
Sinister.
Sinister. I remember when I saw Sinister, I liked it a lot, But the one thing I walked away going, I thought it was the best directed film I'd seen that year. Just in pure, the way he put that film together was gorgeous.
Sinister.
And he did a great job.
It's great.
And so I think he's getting better with each film. He had a sidestep making a blockbuster, but I really think he can make an amazing. Also, I think, even though it might have sounded I was being down on Christianity by talking about the Christian paranormal ripoff, I think it's very interesting when a talented horror filmmaker like him is a Christian. Because I feel like he knows a lot of stuff that I wouldn't know. And he's also drawing from that. When he makes a film about being scared of evil forces, he knows what that means to him. And I find that to be an interesting opposition in a person. Not saying to be mocked. I really see his stuff on Twitter, and I find it really interesting how he talks about it. And he's an interesting character, I think.
And I don't think it's going to be this year, but he according to his Twitter feed, he said he finished Sinister 2, the script for it at least. So
the other guy did.
I don't think he's going to direct it, but there will be a Sinister 2.
Can I introduce the next one?
Yes, you can.
This is one of your favorites.
One of the most films we're really excited about next year is Eli Roth's The Green Inferno. It comes out September 5th. The early word is good. The trailer looked really exciting. I think it played at it. I've seen The Green. That's right. It's a piece of poo. Sorry, guys. Sorry to disappoint you, Eli. If you're watching,
he's not.
Okay, you're not watching. But if you're not listening,
or listening.
Okay, no, I really didn't.
Yes,
like
the film that angered. You texted me like 1 a.m. You were so angry.
Anger's good though. No, anger means a horror film touched the button.
I'm dead asleep at 2 a.m. and yet I woke up to like 10 texts after he walked out.
I also had to sit behind Marilyn Manson and Quentin Tarantino asking like frat boy questions to like, did you show your penis? And I'm just watching this going, oh my God, kill me now.
During the film?
It was AFI after the Q&A. It was all these guys. It was like a frat party with all the famous people. And but the film just tonally is like 10 different movies, none of which I liked. Like really broad comedy. Like bad. It was literally like Porky's. I'd call it Porky's Inferno.
Well, he has that weird tone sometimes, like Cabin Fever had it, like with the pancake mode? The kid.
That I would say he had just finished working with Trauma at that point. And so I think that Trauma was kind of bleeding into that a little bit with the weird like kung fu stuff and the pancakes and
saying people don't
just
know
kind
about
of the weird batshit stuff. And didn't he also do something with Lynch?
He was for 5 years. He was Lynch's, just like you were Clive's. He was Lynch's assistant. 5 years he worked his ass off apparently working there. And I think Cabin Fever does have a little bit of that. Not good Lynch, more like just tone. It's interesting, and I think Cabin Fever is still the most watchable
of his
film in terms of tone.
But by the time Hostel came out, he'd gotten into his kind of frat boy phase of let's focus on these frat boy people and then kill them.
Well, it's hard because Ryan said, well, there are real people like that, and he's showing those people. But I'm like, but I don't want to watch them. I don't want to hear them talk. I don't care if they die. The Hostel 2 was more interesting because there was all the girls. It was more brutal and not fun, but it was more interesting.
Side story. I first met Eli. He had just done Cabin Fever. It had not come out yet. I had not seen it yet, but he was one of the first pitches we did at Fox for Dread. And he came in and pitched us his whole take on Dread. And then Joe and I went and saw Cabin Fever, and I thought it was, it's good for, especially for what it costs. I've never been a fan of his movies, but I loved him in Inglourious Bastards.
Oh,
yeah, he was fun.
Great.
I liked him in that too. Yeah. It's not personal. It's just like I'm not kidding. The reason I think I hadn't liked this stuff for a while, and I know it was a long break before Green Inferno. I was really excited to see it, and I had heard him on NPR, and I was totally fascinated by the stories about it. And I guess I was thinking this is going to be like Cannibal Holocaust or Werner Herzog does because he went to the jungle film. Yeah. It just felt so phony and artificial. None of the characters felt real. And so I was just kind of bummed that they
did do that.
Yeah, they did go there, but the cannibals are real, but all the humans aren't really humans. They're actors pretending to be human for a while.
That is deep, man.
That is deep.
Okay.
He's so going to sue me eventually.
Evil 6.
Apparently, I haven't heard anything about this, but I saw a date for it online.
Is it animated, or are they going back to like the traditional type? Okay.
Yeah, all I saw was Mila's name and
Resident Evil 6.
Whatever, Paul Anderson.
I haven't liked them in quite a while.
Yeah, I don't like those movies, but I figure people would want to know about that.
Yeah.
October 3rd, we're already in October. Dracula Untold. I know nothing about this other than I think it's a loose Vlad the Impaler kind of story.
The first
tied into Dracula, and it stars Luke Evans and Dominic Cooper. October 10th, tentatively, is apparently Cooties,
which I'm excited about.
I like that poster they released.
Very cool.
The poster's great. It's premiering at Sundance, so who knows? Maybe they'll bump
something
it
was written
back
today.
To early. This is Lee Winnell proving that he can do plenty of things.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there was an
And
article
starring
today, early word that somebody had seen saying it might be the best film in the midnight lineup, that it's really fun and was kind of getting the most heat for Sunday.
And it's a horror comedy.
Horror comedy, yeah. Which is great because Lee is obviously a funny. I mean, on Twitter, I think he's one of the funniest people on there. So
yeah. I think this is a tentative date as well. October 10th, Rec 4 Apocalypse. Really looking forward to that. Hopefully they'll start writing the script for this. Paranormal Activity.
Paranorman Activity.
Yep, they switched
that's what he said.
Holy shit! I can't wait to see that.
I wrote this up very quickly.
And there's 5 of them.
All 4.
Are they all coming out at once?
Bill Cosby's in it.
Unbelievable. I meant Paranormal Activity 5.
Leonard Part 6.
That's October.
Wait, Kevin Smith, Tusk is coming out this fall?
Yep.
Oh,
yeah.
what?
It got picked up by...
Has he even cast that yet?
No, that one's already in the can and done.
What?
Yeah, it's got, what's his name? Justin Long, Michael Parks. Yeah, he already cast that, and he made a deal for it with A24, and it's scheduled for fall. Tusk from Kevin Smith. Here's an interesting one. No date yet. Dimension Films, produced by Eli Roth. I love the story behind this. Clown. The actual trailer to the movie leaked this week and was immediately pulled by Dimension. But the trailer was fucking awesome.
Really?
Yeah. What happened was the filmmaker that made it was almost like one of those Grindhouse shorts, like just a fake movie.
Like Hobo with a Shotgun originally. Yeah.
This filmmaker made a trailer, which is still online, for a movie called Clown about, the clown doesn't show up to his kid's birthday party. So he goes upstairs in the attic and finds this old clown outfit, puts it on. And then after the party, he can't take it off, and it starts becoming part of him, and it makes him...
Like Venom.
Yeah, and it makes him essentially into a monster clown.
That's cool.
But the gimmick was he made this as like a fake trailer, but the trailer says Eli Roth presents, or directed by Eli Roth. Eli Roth saw it, thought it was awesome, and it actually helped set it up.
Oh, wow.
So he now produced the real movie version that Dimension
That's
made.
redemption for Eli from our previous statement.
You've
already made a comeback.
Sometimes he does something cool.
Well, it does seem like all his stuff he helps in shorts and trailers are always fun. I just,
I don't understand when, because the trailer got out there and it unanimously the feedback was pretty positive, but still Dimension went after everyone and made sure they pulled it down. And I'm not sure exactly why. Maybe they're just figuring it out.
Ways.
Yeah, it's probably a while away, but looking forward to that. Wolf Creek 2.
Saw it at AFM.
Saw it already.
Yeah,
I think it's coming out. It's coming out overseas, I think, in February, but I'm not sure when it's going to come out here.
It definitely does not have the kind of sincerity and passion that the first one did.
But it's the same director, right?
Yeah, Greg McLean is
like
back,
Greg McLean.
and same with the actor. It looked, there's a trailer on YouTube.
Where does he go?
A little more comedic, if I dare say.
He's a comedy actor. I mean, John Jarrett is a funny guy.
And I didn't find the first one funny at all.
No, it's not
it
funny.
wasn't meant to be.
That's the thing.
Think.
I don't know about that.
I'll say it's more self-aware. It's a little bit more self-aware, but the first one was kind of the first torture film I'd ever seen because it predecessed Saw, and it was.
Did it?
It was around that time
period.
I saw it
before Saw.
Okay.
It may have been released after, but I definitely saw it before Saw.
I know they were called the Splat. He was part of the Splat Pack, the initial label.
Yeah.
And I know that was kind of the first one that I saw of the torture wave, and it just had such a resonating effect on me. And then to see the second one, it didn't have quite the same passion.
Why so long to the sequel?
I don't know. I mean, he tried. He did some other films. I liked. He did the Rogue was pretty good.
Was
I liked
great,
that one.
yeah.
It's fun. I do think he's a good director. I think this is a bad sign for a director. I mean, I think it's a bad sign to go backwards like that, and just unnecessary. I mean, that's a standalone story that feels kind of real, based loosely on the Backpack Killers. Yeah. Going back to it then makes it feel like you're trying to create a franchise out of something where there's probably no demand for a franchise. So. Seems a little strange to me. I'd watch it, but I do think John Jarrett gave an amazing performance. Yeah, because he's like trying to think what he's the equivalent, maybe like a Bryan Cranston pre-Breaking Bad. You know, Bryan Cranston on Malcolm Middle. That's what John Jarrett was. He was like always the humorous guy. I was like, oh, g'day, mate. He came in, and then they put him in this very serious role, and suddenly it just kind of transformed his presence. And I thought he did a great job on it.
Yeah.
But
another one I'm looking forward to. It's premiering at Sundance. It's called Cold in July. It's Jim Mickles' latest. The guy did We Are What We Are and Steakland. And it's based on the book by Joe Lansdale, and it stars Michael C. Hall. So all those
Joe
things.
Lansdale,
I'm like, that's a good combo.
Fantastic.
One that I know Rebecca's looking forward to, Witching and Bitching.
I saw it at AFM.
I forgot who picked it up. Was it IF?
I don't know who picked that one.
I think we announced it at some point.
Yeah,
But I think we announced it.
There's no date, but somebody did pick it up, and it is coming this year.
Yeah, I will say that this one, it's not my favorite film by the director. I'm such a huge fan of Alex de Iglesias, and pretty much everything he's done, I love. And this is not his strongest, but it's such a good concept that it's batshit crazy, and so it carries it the whole way through. But there's something about Iglesias's films that always make them a little inaccessible. It's like if you've ever seen Perdita Durango, there's always just kind of an icky element where the characters are just a tad icky, and it makes it kind of inaccessible. And this is,
I like how you say icky.
Icky.
Because they're Spanish.
This is kind of
a cultural thing.
It might be a cultural thing.
I'm sure part of that is.
Yeah, it's always, and it's in everything he's done. Like, even
is it funny? Like his others are usually pretty funny, besides Perdita Durango.
Again, the humor is kind of icky in parts of it. And so it's one that's kind of inaccessible. And when I saw it at AFM, a lot of people didn't get it and were like, oh, this is horrible. But having seen his entire work, I mean, going from Perdita Durango to, and I mean, he does so much stuff like Action Mutante, Day of the Beast, Baby's Room is kind of his most commercially viable one. And even that's a little icky. So, just keep that in mind. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I can't wait, especially the title.
Yeah.
Up next, here's one I've talked about quite a bit. A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night. It is produced by Elijah Wood. It's premiering at Sundance as well. It's the debut from a director named Anna Lily Amirpour.
Who's Iranian, right?
She's Iranian. The movie's Iranian, even though I think they shot it somewhere in northern northern California. It's in black and white. I mean, it's described as a Western vampire movie, which is sort of accurate. It's definitely a vampire movie, but that seems like the backseat of the story. It's a beautiful film. It's really different. It's really odd. I saw a super early rough cut of it. So I'm curious to see how...
like a Western period piece or Western...
No, just like the aesthetic of it, I guess. Aesthetic, yeah. But it's more, it's I think set in modern time from what I could tell. But
why isn't Beauty and the Beast on this list?
I don't know.
Which Beauty and the Beast?
Christoph Gahn's new film.
When's that coming out?
2014.
Here's the pen. Add it to the list.
Yeah, I got a note here. Raid 2, which I'll say is loosely a horror film.
Movie.
It's not true horror, but it's not on this list either.
It pulls in similar crowds, but
it's quite possibly the one I'm most excited
Cheap Thrills
about.
isn't a horror movie.
Raid 2.
Raid 2 on the top of this list.
Yeah, Raid 2. Great.
The next one's probably one of the ones I'm most curious to see. Horns, I think, is one of the ones I'm most excited to see.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I like the Raid, but I think I kind of think it's a little overrated at this point.
Really?
Well, it depends if you saw Judge Dredd first. That's the problem. Whichever of those two you saw first, the person always likes that one the most.
Yeah,
I saw Raid first and liked the more.
Dread first, and I just saw the Raid recently, and I can honestly say I like the Raid better.
Then you're the first person to ever defy my quote.
But this would go back to our prior conversation on plagiarism. I mean, if you've seen the Raid and then you see Judge Dredd, you immediately point and go, "What's up with Judge Dredd?" I mean, it's a great movie, but it's the Raid. They just remade the Raid.
And Judge Dredd was made 2 years before, it was written 2 years before the Raid was scripted, even though the Raid came out first. So
so there's a lot of weird creative properties.
I don't think it's a proper. I do think there's just the story's so similar in terms of it's like going up the levels of a building.
Yeah.
The Raid is like jaw-droppingly like I've never seen some of those action sequences. First 20 minutes I was like, so this is every Asian action film I've ever seen, and suddenly you're like, whoa.
Yeah, once they axe through a floor, I'm
all
right,
it's amazing.
That's cool.
In fairness, I mean they have done like building climbing sequences like that before, because like Tony Jaa, they seem to crop up in his movies where he would bust in the front door and then move up 5 levels in one shot, kicking ass the whole
I mean, that's the thing.
The Bruce Lee film was essentially that.
But it was never made by a Welsh guy.
That's true.
Look, I'm well
It's
versed
pretty impressive that a Welshman is in Thailand making these films.
I just think it's a little overboard to be like, this is the greatest action movie that's ever been made, and now like that's what
no one should ever say things like that
unless it's Seagal.
That's silly. Yeah,
he can say whatever he wants.
He can say whatever he wants.
All right, next one, Horns.
We just talked about Horns.
Well, Alex Aja, book by Joe Hill, starring Daniel Radcliffe.
I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm not sure when it's coming out, but it's already
done festival, so it shouldn't be too long.
Hellions. Not sure when this is coming out. It's the follow-up from the Pontypool director, Bruce McDonald.
And people say Pontypool director, but this is a guy who like had been making so many films in Canada, and they're always fun. Like they're offbeat. Yeah. Sometimes they're horror, sometimes they're more cult, like road trips. He's always experimenting. I mean, I think he's probably the most interesting, besides Adam McGowan, probably the most interesting Canadian director, and yet really people don't really know his stuff in America.
Yeah.
They know Pontypool, and Pontypool deservedly. It was a really fun movie.
They don't even know Pontypool that well.
Yeah, exactly. They have real
Pontypool
fans
is known like in our circle, but I think that if you just go ask a random guy on the street, hey, did you see Pontypool? They have no idea what you're talking about.
Next, See No Evil 2.
Why is this on the list?
Because I feel like people that listen to us probably like the Soska Sisters, and
but what is? I haven't seen See No Evil 1.
I like the
with the wrestler.
It was with Kane, and it wasn't so good. I mean, some people like it, but I mean, I like the Soskas. It's just I'm anxious to see what See No Evil 2 turns out like.
It's the same company that's making the Leprechaun sequel, and they were doing it like they want to make them better than their original.
Oh, okay. That's fair enough.
That's what they're hoping to do.
I think Catherine Isabel is awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome.
She makes anything watchable.
Too.
Yeah.
Oculus, you saw that one, right? And you've talked about it.
No, I didn't because on the day, and I'll talk about this on air now.
Right. Yeah, you got
on the day that I was supposed to go see it was the day that Millennium dissolved their international division or something like that. And so as I was approaching the screening, they like slammed the door and they were like, "No press allowed." Ooh. And I've never had a door slammed in my face.
And they
before.
took you to a dark room and did things, huh?
Yeah, totally. It was a bad day.
Which is
it was a bad
AFM.
day.
They did icky thing.
Icky things.
They were angels to some.
No, but I will say I did have lunch with somebody from that
you did today.
Part of the film today. Elric was there.
That's right.
And I have intel that a trailer for it should be up online very soon.
I think that's going to be, from what early reports, I think that's going to be one of the better, more original horror films of the year.
Yeah.
Right.
I just have a very good feeling about that.
Okay. Yeah, these are all to be announced, by the way. There's no dates for these.
I guess we better go quicker, huh?
Yeah, Woman in Black, Angel of Death. I didn't even know they were making a sequel to
Is that one through Hammer as well?
Yes.
It is.
Okay.
It's also through
Now,
Hammer.
is that Charles Bronson playing the Woman in Black? Because that title, him wearing that, it's like Angel of Death.
That sold.
It's
so good.
Place in World War II. So it's like
it's like 10 years after,
10,
something like that.
I
after
kind
the
of like
first.
that setting in England. I think it could be kind of interesting.
I love the first one, I think.
Yeah.
I
did too.
It
it was a kind of Hammer's big budget film. Like they teamed up with Alliance to do it.
They needed to.
Yeah, they really did need
make
the something to catapult them back into the eye. And I think it worked well. It's got a British sensibility to it in its kind of quietness, but it's got some decent scares.
It's frightening. It's a slow, frightening movie.
Yeah. Well, I'll check it out before the next one comes out. Cabin Fever, Patient Zero. They made two of these.
Do we know who made it, or if there's a fun angle?
I didn't research enough because
Mitch Ryan, who is in Missionary, is in that. He did it after Missionary.
Oh wow, okay.
Mitch Ryan is I don't. It's not just because it's my own movie, but he's excellent in Missionary. He's a really strong actor. I'm not sure how big his role is in Cabin Fever.
Is he Patient Zero?
Is he what?
Is he the Patient Zero?
I think he is actually.
No,
he's Australian, so that would make him Patient
Zero. Yeah, Australians usually are.
Well, there's two of them coming, and I don't know if they made them back to back or what the story.
There's two Cabin.
There's two
Fever,
more.
Patient
They made
Zero.
a 3 and a 4. I can't remember what 4 is called, but the third one should be out sometime this year.
I actually heard. I think this one is very rapey. I got the word is a little
boring and rapey.
That's how I think I've described multiple Eli Roth films as boring and rapey.
Yeah.
And she got on the cover of the poster with that.
Boring and rapey.
Hostel 3, boring
and rapey.
Here's what I'm really curious about. The remake to The Town That Dreaded Sundown.
By Ryan Murphy. That's the part I don't get.
The guy that does American Horror Story.
I know, and this is just the only thing I know about it, that there's going to be a Fangoria in it because they filled out a release form to use Fangoria magazine in the film. So there's going to be a Fangoria somewhere.
The rumor is it's not really like a remake of the original, but more that they acknowledge the original's existence. Like they're going a meta approach.
Okay.
Because the original is based on a true story.
Yeah.
So they're going with there's a true story and then there was a movie made about it and now.
Well, that makes sense with Ryan Murphy because he's playful.
And I was wondering how they were going to, I understood Ryan Murphy because the original almost has kind of a playful sensibility because it's got this weird down-homey narrator who's like, I remember that hot summer's eve. And then the cops are kind of bumbling.
Which is a shame,
yeah. It's so bizarre considering some of the really messed up stuff in that movie.
Yeah.
And lastly, it was supposed to come out in November, but it got pushed all the way till February 13th of 2015, is the Poltergeist remake. Which stars Sam Rockwell.
Which is the only thing that I'm like holding out hope for, because he's just so good.
I'm going to bring up one more thing that I had on my list that we didn't mention.
Do it.
Del Toro's new TV show, Strain.
Yes, Strain.
I didn't even go for TV because there's just so much horror TV at this point. But yeah, the Strain I'm really excited for.
Yeah.
And I want to mention there was a TV show called Friday the 13th, which had nothing to do with the Jason cycle, but it was about lost antiques.
Are they bringing that back?
No, but I've seen it. It's not. I mean, I saw it before 2014, but while we're on the topic,
that show bored the hell out of me.
Well, I always had a crush on the redheaded girl.
Yeah, sure, but it had its moments.
Yeah, she was pretty cute. So so that is it. Holy smokes, long show.
I have to go to the bathroom, guys.
Yeah, we got to wrap this up. Thank you for tuning and listening. Thank you to our guest Anthony DiBlasi.
Are you going to be staying in LA for a while now? Are you trying to make a film here, or are you heading back to Florida?
No, I'm here for a while. Well, no, that's not true. I am for a little bit.
Okay.
He's going back to Florida.
But do you have something,
a little bit.
even if you can't talk about it, do you have something, your next thing lined up?
We do. I'm producing, well, I'm in post on Paymon, certainly, but I'm producing, Scott is directing a film called Unearthed that I'm going to be a producer on.
Nice.
Which we're shooting back in Florida, but I'm only going to be there for production. So in April we're shooting.
Okay.
Could we do a Facebook contest for a title for Paymon and get people get people to come up with names, and then you take the best?
But I'll probably get sued. I'm worried about that.
All right.
Can you take all responsibility?
Rob, it's on.
Maybe
Rob.
we can. I don't know. I'll figure that out. It's funny. I actually, when I texted him to do this, I was like, "Are you in Florida or going to be anytime? Can you come in?" And he's like, "I'm here. I'm available."
Natalie doesn't let me leave.
Nope.
Well done.
Well done.
And you have a Twitter, but you don't ever use it. You should pimp it, and everyone can follow you, so you can start using it.
What's my Twitter account?
At Anthony DiBlasi.
That's it?
Is it? Is there an underscore in there or anything?
No.
At Anthony DiBlasi.
He's like a stalker. She knew your Twitter handle.
I'm going to get better at it.
You should.
I set it up.
Yeah.
She set it up.
Oh, okay.
She knows what she's doing.
Yeah.
Let's get Anthony DiBlasi on Twitter more active.
What's your Natalie Victoria?
It's actually at Natalie Tweet.
Okay.
Natalie Tweet. All right. I'm going to follow you right after this. Hey now.
Hey now.
Creeper.
You mean outside?
Yeah. So we'll see you next week. We got Charles Band coming next week.
Charles freaking Band.
I don't even know where to start that show.
It's going to be
Where do you
epic.
start?
Yeah.
Epic. So
Can I start with the Roger Corman quote about him? Because I'm not going to say it to him.
What
I know
is it?
he's not listening to this. There's a great quote by Roger Corman where I think it's in the old documentary. He goes, "If the apocalypse ever happens, there'll only be two things left: cockroaches and Charlie Band." And so whatever, I don't know if that's, I think it's meant with affection, which is cool.
Yeah.
I think he means he's a total survivor
He'll
and he'll find his way. And I like that.
They just announced a slate of 3 more movies today.
Ah.
So
yeah, and they keep trying new things, and I think that's
just keeps going. Yeah,
how
I
you
was
gotta
looking
do it.
at them, and one's called like Virgin Capture or something like that, and I was like, man, okay,
I'm going to make Virgin Capture Patient Zero.
That's
my
look it up.
project.
It's not called Virgin Capture. It does have the word virgin in the
Well,
title.
that means that's your title now.
That's
we
my
should
Virgin
make that
Capture.
movie.
Copyright
Virgin
that shit.
Capture.
Patient Zero.
I'm pitching it to Charlie next week.
Yeah.
So,
He'll probably take it from you. So let's we're going to start doing questions now. We'll get our questions
we
together
will.
by next
Yes.
week. But yeah, join us next week for Charlie Man. Check out Cassadaga. Missionary's coming out in the spring. And
the one that's name will be changed by the time you see it.
on our Facebook page.
Which sounds really cool. That sounds like my bag. So I want to see that film.
Excellent. Thanks, Andy. See you
Night,
next week.
everybody.
Bye, guys.
Bye.